by the way, for the audience listening. Welcome, Nicole.
Thanks.
To the in placeholder name, Pulsing Podcast.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, I might have to come up with a better name. Maybe it's like the Sing Podcast.
I feel like it'll just come to you. I actually like that you started without a name, because I think a lot of people get these ideas to start something and they get so bogged down by like, what's my logo? What's my name? What's my whatever? Who cares? Just start creating stuff. So I think that that's like pretty cool.
Yeah. Startup mindset. Just build a plane as you fly it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
everything else will figure itself out.
It's the complete antithesis. I can't even say that word. Okay. So it's the complete paradoxical way of how I think. Maybe that's a better word I can use. I can even say that word. And English is not my first language. But so for the audience listening, how do we know each other?
My first memory of you is from our mutual friend, Preet. And I always knew about you because you were his really good friend, and I was Preet's really good friend, so I was like a little bit jealous of you. And then when we met at his wedding, you were like, "Hey, I'm Paul, Preet's best friend." I'm like, "I'm Nicole, Preet's best friend." So I remember there being some like playful competition there for me anyways. You probably were like, "Who is this girl?" Whatever. But that's my first memory of you. And then we were in his wedding, did that little walkout dance thing. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, I thought you were whatever at that time.
Yeah, you're like,
so I
no
agree.
Competition.
I totally agree with that sentiment. I was like, not even close. Then the other thing was when we first met, when we were competing against sort of Preet's attention, I knew that I was going to be the best man. So I knew that you didn't have a chance.
Got it. And I think you're still winning at this competition, because before we started recording, we were talking about, I'm like, "Hey man, when was the last time you saw Preet?" And you're like, "Oh, we just hang out together all the time, every day, basically." So
that's true.
Cool. I lose.
So our friendship has started off with a dear friend, Preet, and he is going to be on the podcast some point. He just has, so many things on his plate, from the baby to his new house to his jobs and all the side projects that he's working on.
I was going to say, he probably has like 17 business ideas or startups that he hasn't even told anybody about yet. Like,
my God.
Every time I meet up with him, because we see each other probably like once every 6 months, I'm like, "What's going on, man?" He's like, "Oh, I started this new business." Like, okay, another one, huh?
So you're very exposed to, his sort of craving to do something new, shiny objects.
He likes to build.
He likes to build. So, okay. So for the audience listening, who is Nicole and what is she currently doing? Before we do a deep dive into sort of your backstory.
Sure. Okay. So what I'm currently doing, I would say kind of falls into 3 buckets. The first thing I do is marketing, growth, whatever you want to call it, consulting for founders of, I would say, around like seed stage or less, or earlier stage companies. I left my job as like a marketing executive about a year ago and went out on my own. So I've been doing that for the last year. I also started my own e-commerce company. So I am also a founder myself. And I'm building that and figuring that out as I go as well. So that's kind of the second bucket. And then the third bucket is actually recently, and like very recently, I would say in the last month or so, I kind of started to reflect on like, oh crap, it's been a year since I went out on my own and started figuring this world out. I started reflecting on that, some of my learnings, what's worked for me, what hasn't. And I've just felt like called to share a little bit about that. I think a lot of people in my immediate network, women in particular, are craving or want to make that jump from maybe their very successful careers to working for themselves, getting a little bit more time, freedom, and whatnot. And so I've just kind of started sharing more about my experience and my learnings. And as a result, I've had a lot of people reaching out to me recently in more of like a coaching, like mentoring capacity, I would say. Either women trying to accelerate their corporate careers or women trying to make that jump into working for themselves. So I've just been really enjoying that work as well. And I'll just see where that takes me. So those are kind of my 3 arenas right now, I'd say.
Right. So I have been seeing the coaching stuff, and that's the stuff that I was following and seeing some of the stuff that you were posting on LinkedIn. You have become very active on LinkedIn in recent times. And so I love some of the stuff that you're sharing. So if I was to quickly summarize, one aspect of it is that you are now paying it forward. You're also sort of taking your experiences and your learnings, and you are trying to help others who might be having similar mental, financial, blocks, or blocks or challenges, right?
Yeah.
But for the audience listening, quickly, if you were to just summarize sort of this startup that you are, would it be a startup? I would say
very much so.
So what does this startup do? And then we'll sort of pivot into your backstory.
Tall size is what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, so for everyone listening, watching, you can't see because I'm sitting down, but I'm very tall for a woman. So I'm 6'4". Nope, I'm 6 feet. My business partner is 6'4". And we about like 2 years ago, were jamming about how frustrating it is to find clothing that fit our longer proportions. So we set out to build what right now is like the first ever online shopping platform for tall women. So we partner with a bunch of different brands who make clothing for tall women, bring them all into one place, because historically tall women were spending hours online just trying to find a pair of pants that would be long enough, or sleeves that would reach their wrists, or whatever the item is. They can't just walk into a store and like buy clothes. So that is what I've built. We obviously have really big vision for it over time, but for now it's basically like an online marketplace where you can find clothes that fit you if you're tall.
I'm actually surprised that, we're in 2022 and there's no dedicated brand or shop or store.
There are brands. So I would say there are clothing brands that make clothing for tall women, but it's still a very untapped market. Like there are, and actually throughout COVID, a lot of brands started to surface. So they're newer, smaller brands. A lot of women just kind of took it into their own hands and started making their own clothing. But because they're smaller, they don't have the marketing budgets to get their name out there and whatnot. So that's where we kind of come in, is we bring them all onto our platform. We don't have overhead of inventory and manufacturing and all that stuff. Our overhead is marketing. So we help get customers for them so that they can focus on like designing and creating the clothing.
Right.
But it's pretty wild how, so we did obviously a lot of market research. There's like 200 million women globally who are, it's actually 5'8" and above is what our customers are. I thought it would be like
5'8".
I thought it would be like 5'10", 5'11" and above, but they range, based on our data, they range from 5'8" to 6'6". Most of them, I would say the biggest pocket is 5'10" to 6'3". But yeah, as short as 5'8", because some 5'8" women have really long legs, short torsos, or the other way around. So
in this, I'm guessing because these girls or women are 5'8" and above, their feet are probably much bigger too. Yeah, so and they probably struggle with that as well.
Yeah. So the shoes we sell, we like strictly only sell size 9 and above, for 9 to 15.
Oh shoot, that is so cool. Okay, so we're gonna circle back on some of the stuff that you're currently doing and how some of the story around your startup and what got it started and all that stuff. But let's take a step back, or not a step back. Let's rewind the clock, or as Marty Fly would say, go back to the future in some sense. So let's go back to sort of where you grew up, and what were you like back then as a child, and what were you thinking and dreaming of as a kid?
Yeah. So I grew up in a small town called Stroud. It is like an hour and a half, I would say, north of Toronto. It's close to Barrie. It's probably the biggest city that people know of. I lived there basically my whole life. It's very small. 2 stoplights, no gas station, like very, very small. And I went to public school there, and basically was there up until university. And yeah, I would say in my early days, my dream was to be a doctor. I wanted to be a pediatrician. I don't know why a pediatrician, to be honest, but whatever. I wanted to work with kids. And that was the goal. And then I spent a lot of time playing basketball. So there was a point in time where the dream was to like get a full ride to a D1 school down in the States, become a doctor, live the dream. I didn't do either of those 2 things, but I would say everything up until university was like dedicated to those dreams.
anybody in your house like a doctor? Like, how did that idea even come to your?
No one in my house is a doctor. My brother and I are actually the first kids in our family with like and beyond, like between cousins and stuff like that I ever went to university. So no one at all in my family. So that was actually like a very proud moment for my parents, of course. Do you want to know where the idea came from? It's a little bit.
I do. That would be the juicy gossip. Let's get to the bottom of this.
Okay, my favorite movie growing up was Save the Last Dance, and Derek, who I had a huge crush on when I was younger, wanted to be a pediatrician. And I was like, hey, what's a pediatrician? And then I started to learn about it. And I was like, I like kids. I like Derek. That's what I want to be. So maybe that's why I didn't follow through with it, because like my why was clearly not deep enough. But that's how I found out about the profession. And then doctors make, you know how it is when you're younger, right? Be a lawyer, be a doctor, be a this. So I thought it was like a smart thing to do.
That is the funniest and the most adorable story.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where it all started. Save the Last Dance.
I'm so glad that you shared that story.
I still have a crush on Derek, by the way. He's still, yeah.
Derek, if you're listening.
I know, right?
Initially wanted to become a pediatrician and you wanted to play basketball. Mm-hmm. I think what I found really interesting was that you are, as you described, that one is that something like that was expected, which is very odd to hear. That's typically something you hear with like Asian families where they're expected to be a doctor and an engineer. Yeah. So I'd love to sort of pry a little bit there of how that came about. And then two is you also talked about that you and your brother are the only ones who actually got educated and went through school and stuff. So what does the rest of the family do?
Like my immediate family, like my parents? Yeah. So let me answer your first question. So I would actually say that I didn't have the pressure from my parents as it being an expectation. It wasn't that intense. They were honestly just supported anything we wanted to do, but they did have, they did want us to be successful, and they did want us to invest in careers that had longevity and whatever to them. Right. So I think that's where when I shared I wanted to be a doctor, they were probably like, hell yeah, like, let's do it. Right. And supported me in that. I know they wanted at one point my brother to be an engineer. Like it was that kind of thing. They were very supportive. So I would just say it wasn't anything too intense on that front. But yeah, my dad is in sales. He works in the logistics industry. I'm now starting to understand what that means, but my whole life I was like, yeah, my dad's in logistics, whatever the heck that is. So yeah, he's in sales. He's actually 16. He just went out and started his own business, which is really cool. So he had a really successful career and then kind of went and started his own shipping and logistics company with all of his his network, which I think is really inspiring at that age to do. So that's that. And then my mom, she raised us.
That is so cool. So the mom's a housewife and the dad was in sales. This is like a very classical sort of like North American sort of story. Like the backdrop is like, you know, you live in a small town, the dad's in sales. But maybe, you know, there is some merit and something unique about stereotypes. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I had a really, really amazing upbringing. And I think I actually was very fortunate to have one of my parents around with us all the time. I think
so he wasn't a traveling salesman.
And he was for a little bit, I would say, when we were like way younger, but as we got older, he didn't travel as much. But just to have that dynamic of like a parent always home and there for us and all of that. But also a parent out there kind of working and doing their thing as well is a cool dynamic.
That's so cool.
I'm grateful for it anyway.
That is actually really cool that your dad's actually in sales. So did you at all get exposed to sales? Because I think you just said...
Okay, my dad, he would like, now that you asked me that question, this just reminds me. Growing up, my dad's like, you need to be in sales. You need to be... I'm like, Dad, I'm going to be a pediatrician, man. Back off. I don't need to be in sales. But I think he saw something in my personality. My nose just got really itchy out of nowhere. But anyways, he saw something in my personality that I should be in sales. And I kind of I don't know I think his name's Jordan Belfort.
Yeah.
Is that the guy from Wolf of Wall Street? So I guess he did these sales training videos. And I remember my dad like giving them to me and I would do them and take notes when I was like in high school. Yeah, I forgot about that until you just asked me. But yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So the seed had been planted
Yeah.
and it detonated much later, which we'll come to in a bit. Wow. So you did get exposed to sales. And so there was some influence, and your dad, sort of that voice of your dad somewhere.
He's also like very entrepreneurial, I would say. Like growing up, he always had different ideas. I would say he started a lot more than he actually finished, but it was cool to see him just go for it, you know? So whether it was some photography stuff or whatever it was, he did so many different things, had a lot of different passions and stuff that he would turn into little side hustles, which was kind of cool. So I definitely think I got that from him, because that is
so
life.
cool. I mean, to be exposed to parents who encourage taking risks, you know, and not worrying about if it fails or if it doesn't, just go, you know. So I think that's fantastic. So as a child, you are living in a house where your mom's sort of the housewife and the dad's a salesperson, and he is exposing you to sales a little bit, and you've seen the Jordan Belfort videos.
I totally forgot about
I'm
that.
so curious what that looked like back then, and what that...
I'm pretty sure, I can't remember if they were VHS or if they were like the DVD things that came in, like there was like 12 of them. Like you had to do the whole series. Yeah.
Oh my God. I remember there was these cassette tapes, which were how to memorize stuff. And there's a box set of these cassettes my uncle had at his house where you listen to those tapes and it will teach you how to improve your memorization skills. Back then. Now, all that content just lives on YouTube. Anyway, so back then you're growing up in this household, you're in a small town. And so what is your worldview like? At what age did you get that growth spurt where you just shot up from, you know, the rest of the kids in school?
Oh yeah. I don't remember a time in my life where I wasn't always way taller. Like one specific memory is I remember I was so young, like, I don't know, kindergarten, however old you are in kindergarten. I don't even know. Clearly I don't have kids. My parents put me in ballet. And I remember watching this like home video of me at one of my recitals, and they all just followed me like a little pack of ducklings because I think they thought I was their mom or something, because I was so much taller than the rest of the girls in my class. Terrible at ballet. I was stomping around everywhere. But I genuinely don't remember a time in my life where I was not way taller than everybody. So that played a huge role in who I am today, but also a huge role in my childhood. But no, like when I think back to that time, my view was all about like I said, basketball was a big part of my, my childhood and in high school and whatnot. And navigating high school and puberty and all of that kind of stuff as someone who was significantly taller than everybody else was also interesting and challenging as well.
Right. And, you know, for the audience listening, because we're recording this for the third time because of technical issues before, you did mention earlier, and I think you can talk about this, is, you know, how your parents would encourage you to stand tall. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I think my parents obviously knew from a young age. My dad's 6'4", by the way. So this is where it comes from. He's 6'4", and my mom's 5'5". So they just knew from a young age that I was going to be really tall, and they both always encouraged me to embrace it and to own it. I remember they would be like, Nicole, and they like smack my shoulder, like stand up straight. I'm like, okay. You know? And so like, it was a reminder, and I'm grateful for it. And it really just, without them really maybe knowing it or me knowing it at the time, it taught me to just be who I am and embrace who I am and not feel like I have to shrink to fit in or make people comfortable or whatever. Right. So that was big. The other thing that I'm super grateful for is they put me into basketball, which obviously gave my height a purpose. Not that I think height needs to have a purpose, but at that time I did believe that. And I think a lot of people, women in particular, do believe that if you're a tall woman, you should put it to use in some way. So that was good because it put me around other girls who were tall like me. And it almost like glorified my height in a way, right? It made it like a really great thing to have. And so I think that did a lot for my confidence. So yeah, and I think it's funny because growing up, I thought like basketball was my thing. And that's what I was put on this earth as a tall woman to do. But when I didn't continue on with basketball, honestly, like it wasn't until recently in the last couple of years where I'm like, oh, well, I guess I kind of wasted that, you know? And so now I'm starting to realize like my height is something very, very powerful for me that I'm realizing now. It's just kind of showing itself in different ways, which I also think is pretty cool, but it took a while to get there.
So when you got into this basketball team and, you met other girls who were taller, what kind of conversations or what did you actually learn from them? Or how would you sort of help each other out, get through that? Because I'm guessing it was just probably like a really small group of girls who are like tall.
Yeah. The tall girls were always the ones who played down by the basket, get the rebounds. Everyone else would carry the ball up and stuff like that. So it was usually like, I don't know, if you had a team of 15 girls, 4 were tall, right? And the rest were, like more guards. They were guards, right? So they were a little smaller and a little more agile. But yeah, actually, like for me, I think, I don't know that we did anything in the moment to support each other that we realized we were doing. I think just being in the company of other tall women, that alone is just supportive, right? Instead of always being like the token tall girl in your group of friends who in every picture you're like, feel like you need to bend over to fit into the picture or you look awkward, So I think just being in the company of tall women, I'm realizing this now as an adult, is extremely important, but I think that's the benefit of being on a sports team, like a basketball team or volleyball or whatever your sport is. It just makes you feel a little less awkward about your height, I guess. So there's others around you that are in a similar space.
Right. So you've been basically staring down at people without a choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see everything. Concerts, I can see it all. Yeah, I got a good.
It's like don't look down on people unless you can't help it.
I know, right? It's not intentional, I swear. Yeah.
So there's two things that I sort of take away from what you were saying. One is that early on, I think you got a flavor of when you find like your cohort, your peer group, and what that does for you, whether you knew it analytically or it was just sort of happening intuitively. Yeah. And I think there's going to be some element of that in terms of the coaching things that you talked about, and maybe there's some connecting dots there. And then 2, you were trying to get not acclimatized to your body, but getting one with who you are, and just finding yourself. And it's almost like, when you watch like superhero movies where, the superpowers, the initially, like, for example, Superman, he's struggling to figure out, how to use the superpowers, and he sees it as a negative and he wants to just be a normal kid. And, in your situation, you were going through sort of similar mental and physical challenges. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think I think you said it perfectly. Is like being tall as a woman in my eyes is a superpower. And unfortunately, society makes you think otherwise. And I would say a good portion of tall women don't believe that about themselves. Right. And so I think that's another reason why I'm so passionate about this business that we've built, is that if I can just pass on that learning or like help other tall women kind of step into that, if that's all I can do as a result of this, like that is a home run, right? Like that is so cool to me. And I think I can't remember if I said this earlier or not, but I think growing up, I thought I needed a purpose for my height. And then I thought that was basketball. And so there was a while there in my life, like university up until a couple of years ago, where I felt like I wasted that. Right. But now knowing that like it's surfacing in this whole other purpose, and like that is what I'm here to do, or what I'm on this earth to do, is really, really cool. It's so rewarding. Like already it's been so rewarding. And I think that your earlier point around finding your people. So I experienced that as a young age on basketball teams and things like that. But even now, like, whether it's like, this is happening, I guess, in 2 ways in my life right now, which has been very, very, impactful, is, so on the tall side of things, and we'll stop talking about being tall, but on the tall side of things, it's cultivating this community of tall women. And I'm also just noticing I'm making more and more friends who just happen to be tall, which is kind of cool. And there wasn't too long ago where I was out with a couple of these ladies and I was just like standing taller, because it's like you're around people that just like make you feel good, right? And it was a cool feeling. And actually one of them said at the end of the weekend, she was like, she had posted something on Instagram, like get yourself some tall girlfriends because you might just stand a little bit taller. You might just feel a little bit more powerful. So that is really cool. And that's kind of what I want to be able to do with our customers and our community, is bring them together so they just feel a little bit more normal, if that's the word. I don't know, whatever. And then on the other side of that is, now that I am a founder myself, an entrepreneur myself, I've noticed myself building a bit of a network of other female founders at a similar stage as myself, so that we can kind of just go through this together, right? Like, nobody says you have to do any of this shit alone. And I think it's so important to find your people and find your communities. So I've really enjoyed being able to participate in these communities, but also like I'm realizing I'm kind of building them now too, which is really cool.
Right. So I think the part about getting comfortable in your own skin, and, you know, depending on your context, depending on, you know, if you're a girl, guy, or, you know, the XYZ, whatever the other genders are, as growing up, you know, you, as a tall person, you know, to fit in, I think something that you said is that, you know, you would hunch to fit in, versus bringing your shoulders back and standing tall and being proud of who you are. I think there is that element that comes through not only in your childhood, but now that you're building, you know, peer groups and friends, you're sort of giving back and encouraging others to do the same. And I hope that, you know, younger girls who potentially might be listening to this, look at your story from a point of encouragement and see that being tall is actually a superpower. Even though it's just one small physical attribute, but it can, from what I'm hearing, is it can mean a lot more.
It is, like, as a tall woman, it's literally, it takes up a lot of headspace. It does, in a negative way, unfortunately, right? Growing up. So yeah, it is a superpower. Like, because the second you can turn that around, still let it take up that headspace, but like use it to your benefit, not to your, like, as a disadvantage, right?
Right. So do you remember any like funny stories of you being tall and how that would have looked like in terms of maybe guys trying to talk to you, or you trying to, you know, make friends, or, you know, just trying to do like regular things, like go on roller coasters, for example?
Oh yeah. I could ride all the roller coasters at a young age. Yeah. My claim to fame. No, I think it's just like, honestly, it's just everyday stuff. And, just like you could be at the grocery store and see someone struggling to grab something, and they're like, and they give you the look. They don't say it, but I'm like, okay, here, like, you know, or like you're hanging out with friends and they're like, oh, Nicole, can you just get this for me? I don't want to grab the stool and whatever. So there's like little things like that, which are funny. I think the other interesting thing is dating. I was online dating for a while and noticed that the height that men put in their profile is often 1 or 2 inches taller than what they actually are in person. So you always have to factor that in. So that's interesting. But yeah, it's really just like everyday kind of stuff. And then you get the classic, like, do you play basketball? Do you do like all these weird questions that strangers just ask you? And it's like, I'm not asking you what sport you play, buddy. Right.
I think they probably find that like as an easy way in and ask like the most obvious question. Oh, she's tall. Maybe she plays basketball.
Yeah. I'm like, well, you're short. Like, I'm not making assumptions about you, dude. Yeah. I kind of laugh it off now, but like it can be annoying.
Right. Or
if people don't use the right, like, descriptive words, like, wow, you're really big, or you're massive, or you're huge. I'm like, can we not use those words?
Yeah.
So it's just,
so according to you, and to maybe the girls listening who are, you know, young and just overall, what would be the best way to describe your physical attribute of being tall? And I know we'll move past the whole tall subject, but but I think it's so simple. Some of these so innocuous sort of things can sometimes have an inflection point in somebody's personality, their temperament, and how they feel about themselves, and then how they sort of take that perception and put that onto the world that their worldview actually. What is the best way, according to you, instead of saying massive, big?
I see.
So what do you think is like the better language to use in terms of when somebody would want to describe, like, let's say a guy's listening and he's into a tall girl. So what is the best way he can describe her where she feels complimented and comfortable in her skin and emphasizes her without saying, oh, do you play basketball or are you like so massive? So what would be, in your experience, what do you, and this could be different for everyone.
Yeah. No, I think this is a really good question. I would say make an attempt to comment on something other than her body first. So does she have nice eyes? Does she have a nice smile? Do you know her and really like something about her personality, right? Like, I think for anybody, that it goes for tall people, but just for anybody,
right?
There's like the first thing you shouldn't say something about somebody's body the first minute you meet them, right? It's different, but it's like if you saw someone who was overweight, you don't walk up to them and make a comment about that, right? And I know that a lot of times when people say, oh, you're so tall or whatever, it's actually like it can be meant as a compliment or it's just like an observation. But for someone who struggles with that, and it's a lot of women who do, it's not taken in that way, right? So I think that's where the disconnect is, where I think people actually are saying it in like an admirable way, or even sometimes just like, holy crap kind of way, like a surprised. But if someone's really insecure about their height, it can be pretty damaging. So my advice would just be make a comment about something else other than their body. Or if you are referring to them and you want to tell a story specific to their height, just use the word tall.
That's a really good point, actually. In fact, I would sort of extend what you're saying, not only to just, personal settings, but even professional settings, because, typically when you're like meetings or before meetings, people make small talk, is look at the person in terms of how they think, how they see the world, versus their physicality, right? So ask them something about where they're coming from or what excites them. I think that's a way better approach than just commenting on something, and because they might be self-conscious about that thing. I don't think, if somebody has some physical attribute, maybe like Cindy Crawford had like a pimple, not a pimple, but like a dimple, a beauty mark, right? I think she knew she had that mark on her face, right?
I think she might have been aware.
And I'm sure the countless number of guys that have gone up to her and be like, oh, do you have a target on your face?
But some people, like, that is a sign of beauty, right? Or a signal of beauty. Like some people might make a comment because they love that, but you don't know if she's self-conscious about it, right? So just like don't make comments about people's bodies. That's like if we were to summarize. Totally agree. I think that's a really good point. I think, especially girls are especially very self-conscious about these things, and they're far more like attuned, socially adept, and they can read facial language. They just do that really well. I think by the way, not comparing the women to this character, but one character that comes to mind is Shrek. And Shrek is, when you see that cartoon, it explains all of these things in such a beautiful way, that he is like this ogre, but he's such a beautiful personality, right? Anyways, so let's just move past this. But it's good insight, good learning that, in settings, and this is something because of your personal experience, it's better to focus more on the personality than the physicality. And I know we're harping on it a lot, but I actually like in this conversation with you, and I'm also just realizing like how much this physical attribute of mine has played a role in so much, right? So yes, we won't belabor it, but I think it is like an important thread actually that I'm realizing as of late as well. So
yeah. And I think as from the tone and some of the things that you've said, I think you are proud of it. You're confident in your skin now. And what's wrong in calling it out, right? Depending on, of course, the context. Yeah. Okay. So you're in school, you've joined the basketball team, you found your, peer group. You've also had some fascination with becoming a doctor, and there's a beautiful story there. And so, what got you out of that small town and into a bigger town? Like, how did that?
Yeah.
What was that phase like, and what happened there?
Yeah. So my parents still live in the exact house, so Stroud is very much still there. But I think it was university. So I went away to university. I went to Queen's University, which was also felt like a small Stroud. Just somewhere else. But anyways, I went to Queen's, and then right out of school, I wanted to move to the city and have like a Toronto girl job, and found a place actually not too far from you, in Cabbagetown, I guess this is called. Yeah. Off of Parliament. I lived in a house there with 3 other girls I didn't know. And that's when I discovered Toronto.
Oh, so right after Queens, you moved to Toronto.
Well.ca, where I met. That's where I was working with Pri. I got a job at Well.ca out of school.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you're coming in from a small town, coming in from, flying in hot from a small town into a big town. And so at that time you started working with Well.ca, where, you met Preet, who, is common friends between us. Preet, I know you're listening to this. So, hey, what's up?
Man, how's it going?
What's up? We're just calling out the elephant in the room. Or, the sing in the room, SINGH. So you moved to Toronto, and the first job that you got, it was Well.ca.
Yeah.
And so there's this whole backstory of you wanting to be a doctor, but, you wanted to pursue basketball, but then that paused. You went to Queens. I think you mentioned that you studied biology.
Yeah. So I did go to school to be a doctor. So I had quit basketball in grade 11 or 12 because I just couldn't go. I just didn't love it enough to keep going with it. So I quit basketball and I was like, no, I need to focus on being a doctor. That's what I want to do. So I dedicated all of my time to that. I was in biology at Queens. And then I specifically remember writing my MCAT. I gave myself a lot of time because I'm not the smartest. Like academically, I'm not great. Like I had good grades in high school, but like I barely passed university, barely. And so I was like, let me write it in second year and then again in third year and then again in fourth year when it actually matters. Like I wanted to give myself some practice because I knew I would probably fail a couple times. So anyways, I wrote it for the MCAT for the first time in second year. I took like a summer course in Toronto. I was living up in Stroud and I would drive down to Toronto 3 nights a week to like study the stuff. And there was other kids in this class who cared a lot about it. And I was just like, looked around, I'm like, all right, this is literally like their summer job is to pass the MCAT. And I was like working at a golf course and then trying to pass the MCAT on the side. So I was like, there's no way this is going to go down. And I also just realized I didn't want it badly enough. So yeah, I wrote it. I failed miserably. The first time I wrote it. And then I kind of just was like, this isn't for me, but, I finished school. So I finished the next 2 years in my school. So I technically have a biology degree, but I'm using 0% of it. And then, in the last couple of years of school, I just took whatever electives I could. I filled with business courses. So maybe this is where the sales thing comes back. Maybe I was always meant to be in sales and marketing and then went on a little detour and started to come back to that. So
I think your dad's voice.
Yeah.
Secretly, when he planted that seed when you were a kid.
Yeah.
I think that started to sprout.
I'm in the Wolf of Wall Street, just in my brain. You need to go into sales. So, that's.
So the voice of your dad and Jordan Belfort started to sprout once you notice. I think this is probably, I don't know if this is the first time that you notice people are actually passionate about a subject and how they feel about, like, their role was just to pass this thing. And for you were not passionate about it and you got yourself a job at a golf course. What was that like? Yeah,
I just was working at a golf course. It was actually my grade 11 biology teacher. She owned a golf course, like her husband and her, I guess, that he ran it. So I would just work there in the summers. It was the best job ever. I just got to drive around on the golf cart, give people beer, barbecue some burgers and stuff here and there, cut some grass. It was really good.
That is so cool. And I think there's another thing that you mentioned that, when you were, even though you were not passionate about this, you didn't want to eventually become a doctor and you took a lot of business courses. You were like, yeah, I knew I was going to fail a couple of times. And you were so comfortable saying that because you were not afraid of failing.
I'm afraid of failing. I would say in that context, maybe I wasn't as afraid because I didn't want it that bad. Right. I would say for the things I really want, even to this day, I'm still afraid to fail. I think everybody is to some degree. But I think in hindsight, I just didn't want it bad enough. So I didn't really care. I was more so just planning the logistics. I'm like, okay, if I want to go to med school right after, let me give myself some time to fail a couple times first. Otherwise, I won't be able to go to med school until 3-4 years out. Right.
we're definitely going to talk about afraid to fail when we sort of come back to where you are currently. I think that's going to be really helpful for other women, especially, and people who want to get on their journey of starting something and are holding back. Okay. So you've moved to Toronto and you've got your first job at Well.ca. How did that come about? And what were you doing back then?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I actually still think it's like such a good strategy to this day. So my dad, being in sales, I applied to so many jobs when I was in university, like trying to get in with P&G and Johnson & Johnson, like all the CPG companies that all the cool commerce kids went to. I was trying to do that, but I wasn't a cool commerce kid. I literally got rejected from so many of those jobs because I was a science student, not a commerce student. So fine, that's cool. But my dad, I guess, being in logistics and transportation and whatever, I think he was targeting Well.ca to be a customer to move stuff to their warehouse or something. And I was like, oh, this place looks kind of cool. It looks like they're hiring a marketing coordinator. You should apply for it. And I was like, all right. And he was like, you need to find the VP of marketing and hit her up on LinkedIn directly in her inbox, go straight to the hire. I'm like, okay. So I did that. So he helped me. He used some tool to help me find, her name is Paige Malling, helped me find her email address. And I applied the normal route, but then I also just hit her up and was like, hey, here's some stuff that I've done, whatever, right? And just shared my experience with her. And I got an interview and I got the job, which was really cool. And I still think to this day, that is such a smart way to do things. Like, do whatever you can to like stand out amongst the stack of other students or the other papers of people who are applying.
Yeah.
It could be as small as, even if you don't get one-on-one with the hiring manager, just being like, hey, here's my resume. Even when people have done this to me, I'll look at it and be like, oh yeah, this person's pretty legit. And the first thing I do is forward it to the recruiter, whoever, right? And it sets them apart. So yeah, it worked for me. And I still stand by that. I think that that's a really smart approach.
I love that. I totally agree. In fact, when you're applying for a job, do apply the way that the companies prescribe. But I think to the point that your dad made is reach out to the decision maker, because sometimes the HR person is going to be looking at more of checking off the boxes, whereas an executive will see potential and be able to have a more lateral or a more vector conversation with the person. And plus, you're making a connection. You're building a relationship.
And it also shows drive. Like when I see somebody, when I've been on the other side of that, where people have shown up in my inbox on LinkedIn, I'm like, this person wants it, right? Like they're doing things to achieve what they want, and they're trying different things. So I actually think it shows a certain level of like drive and ambition, which especially I would say hands down, that's one of like the key things to look for in anyone you hire, is someone who is going to work their ass off and want to work their ass off to do a good job. Right. And so that kind of, to me, sets those people apart. But you actually said something interesting, which I'm going to double click on, is like, do follow the process that they ask for, because if you don't do that, that also just shows you can't follow instructions, or maybe you think you're too good and you don't go through the normal process. But do both. Follow the instructions, but know that that's not going to do shit. And also go above and beyond and find other creative ways to kind of get at the decision maker. So I think that combo is fire.
Right. But there is a little bit of a spin or a caveat there, is that apply the regular way, and because obviously the audience that's going to, let's say, filter that resume is going to be different from the person you're going to be actually eventually working with or reporting to. Now, what are maybe one or two things to avoid when reaching out to that decision maker, that executive? You want to, for example, I'll give you like a sort of a starting point, and of course, is don't be salesy.
Yeah.
Focus on building an honest connection and relationship with that person to see, versus just saying, "Hey, I saw this job. I don't know. What's your sort of take on? Do you have any other?" Or are there any examples where somebody reached out to you and you were like, oh, that was cool?
I would say the first thing that comes to mind is like, make it easy for that person to take action on what you want them to do. So like attach your resume, maybe like pull out one liner of why you're the right person for the job. Even just being vulnerable and explaining why you're reaching out to them. Like, I think that goes a long way. Like, hey, I'm really excited about this job. I did apply and I submitted my resume, but I'm sure you're getting a lot of these. So I'm really just trying to do whatever I can to get noticed. Here's my resume, see attached, whatever. Would love, if you think I'm a good fit, would love for you to forward it along or whatever it is. Right. I think what a lot of people do is they try to get time with the decision maker and like, hey, can I have an informational interview or whatever? And I mean, fine, but you're just making it difficult, because typically those people will be very busy. And I actually think that informational interviews, that's like a whole other thing. But if you're just trying to get noticed for a job, just make their life really easy. Give them everything they need to know about you and make it easy for them to action. And
I love what you just said. One is make it easy for that person. Think of what their day looks like, and they probably are getting, bombarded with other people maybe who might be reaching out to them now because it's so much more easier to do it on LinkedIn. I don't know how you did it back then. But also having empathy for that person. And then 2, don't go in for an ask right away. In terms of what you said is don't try to get an overcommitment of, can I get you on a call? Make it easy for them. Give them the information that they might need, having cognitive empathy for them, but also make it easy for them to decline. So you're sort of going in with like super passionate, strong opinion, but held loosely. When you don't have that, I need this, you're not coming off as needy and salesy.
Yeah, it's almost like you're just leaving it in their court, right? There's
Exactly.
no action required from that person beyond forwarding it if they feel like they want to.
Yeah.
But if not, it's like, hey, thanks for your time. Like, thanks for just looking at this, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Make it easy for them and don't ask for a commitment right away. Yeah. Leave that in their court. I love that. Okay, fantastic. So you, and all thanks to your dad, he sort of gave you that idea. I'm so glad that you gave a shout out to your dad.
Jordan Belfort though, so.
Fantastic. That's the whole part, is you pass on the knowledge.
Yeah.
That's what makes humans great. We pass, because humans are the only, beings, and maybe this is, this from biology, is when we're born, we're empty vessel. Whereas like a giraffe is born, it knows right away what to go eat. And, they, in the animal kingdom, the baby is born and they know what to do. Whereas, us for a couple of years, we can't even our head will pop off. So such delicate creatures. Anyways, okay. So you're at Well.ca and you started, and so what are you doing there and what role did you ask for and what did you start doing? And tell us about your Well.ca days.
Yeah. I just started as like a marketing coordinator. So literally did anything they told me to. It was a really cool experience. It was a small company. I still, again, to this day, advise people to start in small companies if they can, because I think you just accelerate your experience, the exposure you get to people and projects, compared to working for like a massive corporation where like you're given your laneway and that is it. You better not step out of that. And like, you won't have the opportunity to step out of that for another year or two. It's very slow growth, in my opinion and in my experience. So yeah, I just did a little bit of everything. I think what I did gravitate to was more of the email marketing side of an e-commerce, business, and eventually like went on to kind of specialize in that space a little bit. But yeah, I just really did it all.
So 1 second. So I think there's a couple of things here for the audience listening. What did Well.ca do actually? What business were they in?
Yeah. So they're an online retailer, for just like wellness products. So across a variety of categories, it could be food, like home cleaning, beauty, personal care. They have some pet stuff. They just sell a little bit of everything. Their kind of unique spin was they're Canadian, and a lot of their stuff is organic, natural, green, whatever you want to call it. And it was kind of before the whole boom of like all of these. That's just kind of what it's so common now, right? To look for those types of products. You kind of had to go to somewhere like Well.ca to find those things. And they basically, their whole thing was there's a bunch of these products and brands out there who are trying to create cleaner alternatives. Let's bring them all into one place, so you can easily find those things. And so that's what they were building. I
think you should talk a little bit more about this if you can, especially for people or who are coming out of college, university, and trying to find their first job. One is, how do you, get that job, which we just talked about. The other aspect of it is what kind of company, scale and size you should join, because it gives you more responsibility.
Yeah.
And do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think for me, it's joining a startup, like sub 50 employees, sub 100 employees, I would say, because it's so fast paced and it's so experimental, and there's no like red tape. You're creating the processes as you go. So you just learn a lot faster. I've worked for both startups and I've worked for companies like Bell, right? And it's I didn't last long at Bell. It was just not a good fit, but it's like a totally different environment. And so I think as someone earlier in their career who are looking to just like soak up as much information as possible, I would definitely recommend that route. And then also the people, I think like building a network and relationships with people is honestly one of the things that I think attributed to my success in my career. And I think it just helps you do that because there's less hierarchical like layers, right? I remember when I was working at Well.ca, I was sitting right next to our CMO, and she was chief marketing officer and merchandising officer at age 22. Like you can't do that in Bell or at some of these other corporations, right? And so if you start to make relationships with those people who have influence in the space, maybe they see something in you as like a new someone earlier in their career, like those relationships can actually take you quite far. So I think that that's an important thing to think about too when you're first getting started.
So you have cognitive empathy for the leader that you're going to work with, and you start a conversation with them. You get the job in the company, and if you start small, and I'm also from a similar bent of mine, that the smaller company you start with, the more roles and responsibilities you're going to have. And early on, you're going to have this generalist sort of worldview where you understand how each person works, and you can start relating to the people who are doing, let's say, media buying. Yeah. You can start relating to the business people, the sales people, the marketing people, and how they all sort of function together as a whole. So in that period, when you were at Well.ca and you're sort of dabbling in all these different things, and it's like this really fast-paced environment that you were talking about, are there any interesting learnings, observations, or projects that you worked on that sort of had a click in your mind? You're like, wait, my worldview before this point was this way, but now all of a sudden, I see the world this way.
Got it. I would say like two things. This kind of touches on your other point too. Working for a smaller company and getting exposure to all of those things, like no one knows what the heck they want to do when they come out of university, right? Like, so even just getting exposure to all of those things versus being like, here's your only job. I also think that just helps you kind of hone in on like where your own path, which is really cool. So I think that that's actually one thing I took away from Well.ca was I always did this in my career where I just like volunteered myself to do all the things, right? Like if I saw an opportunity or like, hey, I'm interested in this or I'm interested in that, I would always find a way to partner with that person or collaborate because I just wanted to learn about it. So that is really, really cool. And I think that that's what happened at Well.ca is I worked on so many different things because I was like a marketing generalist. I did it all. That I really found myself like narrowing in on like geeking out hard on email marketing. And maybe this is where my science background comes in because marketing in general is very like, it's a lot of experiments, right? You're trying to do different things creatively and see how it influences people's behavior. But with email, it was really cool because you can literally A/B test the shit out of everything and get instant feedback. It's not like testing two different radio commercials and you have to run them for whatever and have all these loose feedback signals, right? Like you can literally test so many different things against each other in email as a channel and like learn and influence people's behavior like immediately. And I thought that was so cool. So that's probably the only piece that I took from my biology degree is like running these little experiments. At least in my head, I felt like a little scientist in my lab pouring things into beakers. But yeah, and then I kind of followed that interest. And then my next job I was just that. I was an email marketing specialist and kind of built that part of my career a little bit. But being able to just follow your interests is really cool.
I love that is that you had, and this is, you're right, like your time spent in science bringing some of that scientific approach to even this work and testing. And you're almost like a scientist testing out your hypothesis of saying, okay, is this going to work? A/B testing, as you said. Are there any other things that you might have been exposed to in science and biology in your school days and some of the early that helped and influenced the way you approached, let's say, email marketing?
Yeah, I did a minor in psychology. So I think that was a big thing. And I think that plays out a lot in marketing, right? Like that's literally what marketing is. So I think that, I didn't know it at the time. Again, I was doing it because I thought it might help me be a better doctor. But it actually kind of manifests itself in a totally different way when it comes to influencing people's behavior. So that was, and I'm still like that today. Like even today, I'm almost to the point where I need to chill out on it. Is like, I'm very experimental. I'm always running tests, right? Like I'm always trying this versus this, which performed better, and always kind of like honing in on what's working and what's not, almost to a detriment, to the point where I wish I didn't look at that stuff as much and just kind of focused on like what I wanted to do and what made me feel good, and not really put so much weight into how other people react to things. But I think it's just something that's ingrained in me. It's just how I operate.
And this is probably like a sort of off tangents, but still connected to what we're talking about question. When you started working for Well.ca, and this is your first job, correct? At this point, I'm just making an assumption here, and I would love for you to talk about this. Is this probably the first time your height was not a factor in what you were doing and what your identity was?
Maybe, but I actually think my height has helped me a lot in I'm going to call it my corporate career. Because I think, because I carry myself confidently as a tall woman, I think people automatically respect me. They also thought I was a lot older. To this day, people think I'm a lot older than I actually am. So when I'm 22, 23, that's helpful when I'm dealing with brands and stuff like that. They don't know I'm fresh out of school, right? And so I think it actually helped me with getting other people to respect me and take me a little bit more seriously than I might have otherwise been, being younger or maybe shorter, right? So it's interesting. Like I didn't realize it in the moment, but now looking back, I actually think that thread has kind of continued throughout my whole life. And instead of looking at my height as a disadvantage, I've always tried to find ways to work in my favor. When
you join like the corporate world, or when you start working for a company, then your identity is no longer what you look like, because you're running email marketing. The customers don't know what you look like, and your colleagues care about the results, the business outcomes, right? So I was just curious, like how much that, but I think some of the story that you talked about in terms of, when you were growing up and how your parents encouraged you to stand tall, I think it was just the person that you had become by then. So it's not about the height, but it was just how you felt comfortable in your skin. And it's no longer about the height and being tall, but it's just how you sort of showed up, broad shoulders and all that stuff that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So then you're in email marketing, and you found that to be fascinating. And that's probably your first passion.
Yeah.
Because
nerdy.
Because when I see, like, let's say your LinkedIn profile, like email marketing is like almost like a central pillar.
It was like my bread and butter for a really long time.
Right. And so how did that experience of, getting into email marketing change over the different companies that you work for? So for example, you went to FreshBooks. Do you want to talk a little bit about how it was different at FreshBooks? Yeah,
I actually I was very calculated about it, to be honest. Like when I realized I enjoyed email marketing a lot, and like, not only did I like it, but email is so powerful for any business model. Like every business uses email marketing in some capacity, and it is one of the most powerful marketing channels. So it actually worked very well. I'm glad that it worked out that way. But I knew I wanted to specialize in it. And Well.ca was a smaller company at the time. They didn't have the best tools, the best resources, et cetera. So I went to a bigger company who were hiring people solely just to do email. And I knew that I would be able to like specialize and really hone in there. So that is specifically why I went to FreshBooks. And it all played out as I expected, which was awesome. And then I kind of just kept rolling with it, to be honest. So like even after FreshBooks, my next job, where did I go after that? Oh, The Source and Bell. So again, I oversaw the email marketing program there, and I just kept going up in seniority. And like working for larger companies with larger budgets. And it kind of, while it was still email marketing, it got more sophisticated and more intense, I would say, up until I got to Envision, where I was director of email marketing there. But the cool thing at this point in time was email wasn't the only channel you were using to talk to your customers anymore. There was push notifications. There was in-app messaging if you're using like a SaaS product. There's SMS in the e-commerce space, and they all need to work together. So this was actually a really good example of a time when I was like, hey, I know email marketing really well. These other things are also happening to our customers. None of it's coordinated. Let me figure out how to bring it all together. And so that was, again, another thing I did was just raise my hand to figure that out. And that's actually how I started to branch out beyond email, because I did get to a point in my career where I was like, okay, I don't want to just do email. So that was what I used to kind of branch out and just kind of own all customer communications in general. So that was, that's how it all kind of played out.
Let's double click into some of this stuff and expand on some of the things that you just said. One thing that's very evident and sort of in your story arc is that you went from somebody who was doing something very tactful, email marketing, A/B testing, and you came into this executive and leadership position, right?
Yeah.
So and I'm so glad that you touched on this very at the tail end of what you were saying, is that you were starting to look at the user journey and say, where's this broken? This is not just email, but where else can we make an intervention in a meaningful way? So now for the people listening who might be doing some other thing, analytics, email marketing, whatever their social media marketing, whatever they're doing, do you have a sense of what are the things that you were doing differently from a tactical level, relationship building, that you had sort of done early in your days? And strategically, what were some of the things that you were doing that was helping you climb that ladder really fast?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I've thought about this a lot recently. A few things. Okay. So I think relationship building is hands down what I believe to be the most important thing you can do to accelerate your career growth. You have a choice. You can sit in a corner and do your job and not talk to anybody, or only talk to like your direct stakeholders, or you can find opportunities to collaborate. It could be literally something as simple as, let's say I'm an email marketer and I'm really interested in our content team. Hey, just asking the director of content marketing, hey, I just want to learn about your job. I think your job's really cool. And then you start to build that relationship, right? And everything works together. So I think the more you start to kind of expand out of your own little bubble, and start forming relationships with people across the organization, you start to almost make a bit of a name for yourself. And people think about you when they have to go partner with marketing. So if I'm forming a relationship with somebody in product, for example, and they got to do something with marketing, they're like, I know Nicole in marketing, let me go to her, right? And so I think that that's so important and something that you should start doing from day one, and not to feel shy about that, because a lot of time, people like to talk about themselves, right? So if you go and ask someone, hey, can I get 30 minutes of your time on our company's budget? We're getting paid to be here at work. Let's just jam. They're gonna be like, hell yeah. And they'll just talk about themselves for 30 minutes. Right. And so you've established that relationship, you're learning as well. And then you also start to come up with ways of oh, that's what they do. Okay. I imagine if we partner in this way, we could actually help each other. And so relationship building is huge. The other thing I think that worked very well for me is not waiting for people to come to you with opportunities. So an example that I just gave is yes, I was doing email marketing, but no one was owning all the other touch points the customer was getting. It was so sporadic. It was all over the place. And so I literally remember I built a business case of why I should be the person to create the lifecycle marketing team at Envision. And this was at a time when lifecycle marketing wasn't really a thing. No one, it's quite the buzzword now, but it wasn't really a thing. But I was someone needs to be thinking about this, because maybe this is where my psychology was coming in. But I'm we look insane to our customers right now because we're sending them all these different messages. So there was many times in my career where I put a case together as to why something wasn't being done well or wasn't being thought of at all. And if I basically asking for permission to take it under my umbrella and loop it into things I was already doing and what impact I believe that would have on the business. So that's one thing I think that actually helped me accelerate my career, is I just kept raising my hand being I want to do that. I can do that. I can do that. Instead of waiting for my yearly review with my manager and see if they came to me with those types of opportunities, which they probably wouldn't have even had time to think of or notice that that was an opportunity in the first place because they're busy doing other things. So those are I would say two big things that for anyone listening who's looking to accelerate their career, like do those two things and you'll be solid.
Actually, to be honest, you actually said a couple of things and they all have their own sort of bucket. But firstly, I'm so impressed. And I'm not just saying this because we're talking, but I love that you were proactive and you built the business case and you said, wait, there is more to this and I want the responsibility. I want to take this on. And by building conversations and relationships, you were able to connect the dots in terms of what is dysfunctional internally, because the customer doesn't care what the company looks like internally.
Yeah.
They just care about what they care about. Yeah. And so if they're getting this sort of broken record messaging and somebody on the inside is taking the initiative to sort of make that a beautiful experience, I wonder how much this is connected to how your dad, was experimenting with different things and how much your childhood played a role in this sort of the way you approach the work. Is because on one end, I'm seeing that you're super passionate about this and you're like, I want to take more responsibility because that's what you do, right? Yeah. Versus when you were in biology and you're like, I don't want to do this at all. Mm-hmm. Versus what you saw when you were as a kid, how you got exposed to how your dad did the work and he did a lot of experiments and he was okay with failing. I don't know how all these three sort of Venn diagram circles sort of play into this relationship building, connecting the dots, being proactive, building the business case, and really caring about the customer.
Yeah, I would say one thing that comes to mind is maybe it's the sales thing again, but it's like you do kind of have to sell yourself, right? Like you're pitching your manager. In my case, it was always my managers. I'm pitching them something. I'm selling them an idea of something, right? And so I think definitely there's some overlap there. But I also just think being human too goes a long way. Just being down to earth and just being real. And that's what I would try to do, right? Is I would go to these people and say, hey, I really want to do this, or I really want to do this, and then see if they were down.
Or let me reframe the question. Mm-hmm. What are the things that people you see, which is so glaring and obvious to you, are not doing, and which is holding them back in their career?
Okay. Yeah. Not creating opportunities and instead waiting for opportunities is one big thing. And being shy and not forming connections. And that doesn't mean you need to go knock on the CEO's door and sit down and have a coffee with, that's scary for a lot of people. It could literally just be, who is your peer, someone at your level, your age? If you're in marketing, who is that person on the data team? Who is that person on the product team, et cetera, et cetera. And just start there and start forming those allies or whatever you want to call them. And then you'll eventually start to realize that maybe they introduce you to their manager because they think you guys could work on or whatever. It kind of just domino effect from there. But getting outside of your direct team and knowing that it's okay to do that. Those are kind of two things I think.
I love that you almost have there are no rules.
There aren't any rules.
Exactly. The walls are inside our brains and not on the outside. So I love this, which is you have this entrepreneur mindset, is create the opportunity. Don't wait for others to ask you. Step up and build that business case, take on more responsibility. Now, when I look at your your resume or your LinkedIn profile, it becomes so obvious how you climb so fast is because you're I want to do more. So now, as you're going up in your career and you're doing all these things, you're being proactive, you're creating your own opportunities, you're building the connections. I would see you as a person who connects the dots and is an integrator of people, and not only people, but the businesses and the customers and their experiences. At that role that you did at Bell Curve, where you became the VP, that was probably your first executive position. Yeah. Was there a big difference in what you were doing in the past to what you were doing here? Because that is a big shift, going from management to becoming an executive. what were the things that were happening then? And how did you even get that? How did you even get into that opportunity?
Yeah. So I will say I didn't jump quite from like management. I guess depending on I just want to make sure it's clear to the listeners. I didn't go from like a marketing manager to a VP of marketing. That's not what happened. But instead did the like director thing for a while, then senior director thing for a while, and then VP. But sorry, what was your question? How different was it?
Yeah.
Very different.
or actually, let's start with, because when you're like a director,
yeah,
and of course, when you go from like junior to senior to manager,
yeah,
there's a big jump between senior to manager. And then there's a jump between manager to director. And then there's a big jump between, and of course there's like all these other middle positions there. But the one that goes from director to executive, that's a big leap because that completely changes everything. Not only your responsibility, of course, responsibilities do increase, but as an executive, now you're in charge of future value versus present value and versus day-to-day versus looking ahead, right? So there's a huge shift in mindset, in the way you approach the business. I would love for you to sort of talk on that and how that was, or how was your experience in sort of going through that journey?
Yeah, I haven't actually reflected on this, so I'm going to do it in real time. So hopefully it's coherent, but no, I think the biggest change for me is, it's less of the like departmental strategy and it turns into like business, like and just to add some context here. So I was VP of growth for Bell Curve, which was a growth marketing agency. They were technically based out of San Francisco, where all the founders were in San Francisco. All of our clients were from the Bay Area, but it was remote. I was able to work here. So they were a growth agency. So I actually was my first time agency side too. So it was a big change and a lot of learning for me. But I was building the agency, right? I wasn't just building a team. I wasn't just building a marketing strategy. I was building the agency along the managing partner, so my boss, because it was a new agency that was spun off from another business that they had. And I was also now exploring this like client relationship, right? And helping them build their businesses as well. So it was a massive change for me. And I think, but I actually loved it. Like I actually think that I am such a big like idea person and like I'm a very like vision. Like I have a different idea every hour, it feels like. And so that was the perfect role for me. And to be able to build a team and see how that all works. Cause it kind of got me out of the like executional tactical campaign, like that kind of stuff. But I got to flex my idea muscle all the time, working with clients as well as building Bell Curve. So it was a big change, but I think it lent itself nicely to my strengths. So it worked out.
Okay. So there's a couple of really beautiful things. One is because you had that experience of doing the thing and building the campaigns and, doing the A/B test, because a lot of times what happens is that people who give the ideas or the advice don't have to live with the advice.
Or they've never been in. Yeah. And I think that is such a huge differentiator between a good people leader and a friggin' terrible one. I was just talking about this the other day with somebody, is that having that like feet on the ground experience, I think helped me become the people leader that I'm proud of today. Because I was able to empathize with people. I was able to understand like what went into some of these things, how long things take, how painful some of these things are. They're really manual or whatever. So yeah, it was definitely something.
And this is something that I am a big fan of and a big advocate of. People who lead but know how to do the work. Mm-hmm. Right? I just find it like infuriating and annoying when people say, I just want to lead people. It's like, and when you ask them to do something, they can't even open PowerPoint. Yeah. Like there is a whole bunch of people in our system like that. But anyways, so love it. So that you've gone from this like heavy practitioner who's connecting the dots in this journey till you became VP. And I'm sure that there's the emphasis would have been much larger in this executive position, but what role did understanding the business side of things, knowing how the company makes money, how much did that play a role early versus when you were an executive?
I was always the type of person who, like, if I wasn't the one managing the budget, or if I wasn't in some of those meetings with all the like directors or VPs, I would ask my manager to be like, hey, I know this meeting you're going to, or you're presenting our strategy, or you're talking through the budget or whatever. I'm not in it, obviously, because I'm not senior enough, but like, can I get 30 minutes of your time after so you can debrief with me? Like, show me your presentation. Tell me what you guys talked about. What questions did they have? So I actively did that with every job I had because I was so curious. And if I wasn't allowed to be in the room, I was fortunate to have managers who wanted to teach me that stuff. I even had one manager, actually, like, hands down, if she listens to this, her name's Jen Marvel. She was like hands down the best manager and mentor I ever had. And she actually, like, if I wasn't allowed to be in the meeting, she would give me parts of the deck that she would be presenting to just create. And she would put that on my plate, which is pretty admirable now that I look back at that, because it's probably a lot faster for her to just do it herself. But she like gave me that opportunity. And not only that, but like in meetings, and I heard this from other people as well, but like she would say, hey, yeah, so this is an analysis that Nicole actually did. So she actually gave me a seat at the table without me physically being at the table, which was really cool. And a really cool learning I got from her that I've tried to pass on. But yeah, I think just like asking those questions and learning about the business, even if that's not supposed to be part of your job, I think that helped me get to the point of VP a lot faster, because I was able to have that like business acumen and like make those decisions and understand how things all worked together sooner than maybe I would have otherwise if I didn't do that.
Right. I mean, okay, so three things. One is it's so rare that people are curious, proactive, and they will ask to get these meetings. Because we were like, it's not my job, I don't care, you know, and so there's a huge inflection point. It's like the butterfly effect. Each little conversation interaction is paving the path in your own sort of unique way and leading you down this sort of trajectory, right? Yeah. The other thing that you talked about was that the managers that you had early on, or even little things like Jordan Belfort, or, you know, your dad saying, talk to the VP of marketing. That I don't know how early on that started building that mental framework that you shouldn't be afraid to reach out to someone and build that connection, because a lot of people are just sort of timid, apprehensive, timid, or afraid to ask, or they feel like they're sort of breaking some sort of a rule.
There are no rules.
Exactly.
Make your own rules. And you're not always going to have managers that give you the time of day. And I was fortunate that I did. But that's okay. If it's not your manager, it'll be someone else, right? If it's not your direct manager, maybe it's someone else on the team that is more senior than you, but you don't technically report into, or whatever it is, right? You have to get creative, but there are always people out there. I would say there are more people out there who just genuinely want to help and teach and, again, talk about themselves and feel like a bigwig. Like, there are more people like that than people who won't give you the time of day, in my opinion.
As you've climbed the ladder, you've now become an executive. And you know how you said that there are certain things that you learned from other managers that you want to now pass on to your team and encourage that. So are there any specific lessons or skills, not skills, or maybe behaviors that they acted like? For example, one is that she's exposed you to the content, giving you a seat at the table, building your mental confidence. Yeah. Are there other things that you've experienced over your life, maybe the top 2 or 3, that now you're like, wait, I learned that and now I'm actually doing the same for, you know, my team?
Totally. So I definitely think that. So if there were opportunities where, again, someone on my team couldn't be in the meeting, I would make sure that I would set time aside to go through that with them. And often I would initiate that for them because I knew how beneficial it was to me. Right. And so even if they didn't ask for it, I typically did it with the people on my team who I saw something in, who worked really hard, and maybe they just didn't know to ask for that kind of thing. But I think they probably received it as like, oh, this person really cares about my career and my growth and all that. Right. So that is something I learned from Jen that I do myself. I think transparency is always a big one for me. Again, something I admired from Jen. was that she was very honest, like to the point where you were like, are you supposed to be telling me this? Like, you're telling me a lot. Not anything that would be harmful in any way, but like, it was just the first like manager relationship where she actually like treated me like an adult and like I could handle it. And she would be super honest with me about areas where she was feeling maybe incompetent in the moment or whatever. So she was very vulnerable and transparent with me. And that like built a really strong and trusting relationship between the two of us. So I try to do that as well. Again, like you can only go so far with it. Like I'm not going to tell people on my team that, oh, a bunch of people are getting laid off. Like that kind of stuff is confidential. You can't share that. But I think some people in management roles try to like put on like, I'm powerful. Let me like hoard all this information because it makes me more powerful. But I think that that's stupid. So that would be another thing I would say is try to share as much as I could to build that trust. And then this is like super tactical, but it definitely stands out. So one of the managers I had at FreshBooks, Erin Smith, she picked apart my PowerPoint presentations like no other. And it annoyed the shit out of me in the moment. Like she would book meetings with me and be like, all right, come on. And she would whiteboard out like how to tell the story and like how to like break apart a slide with a million things on it into something a little bit more digestible. And in the moment I was like, oh my gosh, this is so annoying. I have to redo all of this. But now that I look back on it, like I can create a pretty kick-ass slide deck now. And if it wasn't for her walking me through that, I don't think like that's like such a powerful skill to have, especially as you get more senior, because all you do is build business cases and tell stories and try to get buy-in. So I'm actually glad she did that. And so I am now probably that annoying person, or I was that annoying person to people on my team as well. So yeah.
That's beautiful. So you've had a constant string of good managers and mentors who built that skill, who encouraged you to step more into the field. And I think another point that you added at the tail end of this was, executives and typically do the work and decision making in meetings, whereas creatives and the production happens outside where they can be in a flow state.
Yeah.
So those are very different contexts and environments. And with you being a practitioner who's mostly in that flow state, doing, spending time, looking at email marketing, writing those emails, to now doing a lot of the decision making in those meetings. How did your day-to-day change, and how was that experience for you at the beginning? Did you find that to be helpful? Because what happens is that, when you go from like being in that flow state all the time, doing really cool work, and that's what you're known for, to now just being like back-to-back meetings, you're like, oh God, another meeting.
Yeah.
How was that, or did you take that well, or is that something you look forward to?
I actually, I remember this, specifically, it was like a thing that I had to learn because I was so used to producing tangible things that I could hit send on and get reporting on, right? All this stuff to I would be like, wait, what am I doing? Like, am I working hard enough? Am I doing enough? Because it changes, right? The type of work you're doing totally changes. And it's more like longer term strategic thinking and like building out these PowerPoint slides and telling stories and talking about it over 1,000,001 meetings versus the more tactical stuff. So I actually had like a bit of like self-worth issue at one point, thinking I wasn't good at my job anymore because I wasn't producing as much as I used to. But I remember that very clearly, that transition. And again, it's something I now try to coach people on my teams through, because they're like, oh, well, I'm not doing as much, or I'm like, no, but this is the moment when you go from being like an IC to like a manager, right? And like a people leader. So
right.
It's a little uncomfortable at first, but.
Right. Yes. I think you touched on a really good point. Is that because when you're stepping into this new thing where till this point you were seen as a valuable asset because of being an IC. Yeah. But now because you're in charge of strategy and future vision, and really getting and empowering and enabling your team to get there.
Yeah.
You're just doing thinking and meetings and getting decisions made. And there is that level of imposter syndrome. You're like, wait, what is happening here?
Because you don't track that. You aren't like, today I made this decision and this decision, and by the end of the day, I made 7 decisions. You don't track that. But when you're like creating ads or sending emails, you're like, oh yeah, in the month of May, I sent this many emails and generated this much revenue. But you don't do like, you aren't like, oh, I made 7 decisions and those generated, like there's no connection. So you just kind of feel like you aren't doing anything when I think about it. Yeah.
So, okay. So we're talking about your role at Bell Curve, where you're the VP and you're sort of building out the agency. And now you're more focused on strategic vision, decision making, and that maybe affects like long-term top line and all that stuff, the business side of things, and enabling and empowering the teams. Is there anything about your experience of going from IC to this executive position and now being in that executive position that you wish, maybe leadership should be done differently? And I'll give you an example to sort of give you some sort of a context. One thing, and this is more specific to like creative people, is as they go up the ladder, they're taken away from what they're really good at and what they're passionate about. Is, let's say somebody's a really good writer, they're just going to end up managing people and doing planning and all that stuff. Whereas a creative art person will, again, be leading art directors, creative directors, but they won't be doing any physical work themselves. So it's like they train their whole life to become really good at something, and now they no longer have to do that, and they have to now teach other people to do it. Also, part 2 of that is not all great ICs are good managers, because there's a difference between managing the work and leading the people.
Yeah.
Right? So are there things that you've experienced in your side of things that you feel that should be done differently, or this is your perspective on how leadership should be done? 2 is, should you still be close to the work? Any thoughts that come to mind?
A few. I don't know if they're productive or not, but I think for me, because I'm such an idea person and I like playing the like game of chess that is business and managing teams and people and stakeholders, the more senior I got, I actually felt better in my role. Like I felt like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like right now, the thought of going in and sending an email, I'm like, ugh. Like it just, the execution of it stresses me out. I'm not good at it. And so I've learned that about myself though. And even now with my own businesses, it's like, I need to have people around me that can like support me in those areas to keep moving forward. So for me, it worked well. I think, so I don't know. Like if you're one of those people who like to create and you like to produce the work and you find you're getting further and further away from it, I actually don't know the answer to that. Like it worked for me, but I wonder if there's ways where if it's at work or outside of work, or there are other ways that you can scratch that itch, right? Like maybe you siphon off a small little amount of the actual production work that you do, or maybe you enjoy just like setting up more like creative discussion and critique meetings and stuff like that, where you can kind of get in the weeds a little bit, but offer your expertise instead of the actual work itself. Or maybe you got to scratch that itch like outside of work.
There are some very few actually examples of this. And I can speak to, let's say, there's this digital company called Work & Co. And there's this company brand agency called Pentagram. And those are the the only 2 that actually I know have this inverse pyramid, where the senior most people are doing the work and they don't hire junior people at all. And so what they do is, instead of having one senior person overseeing 4 projects, what they do is one project at a time and 100% dedicated to that project. And there's no presentations, there's no PowerPoints. They're literally sitting with the client and just walking them through, okay, this is what we're making. And they can see the screen, and they sort of approach it in that way. And they deliberately decided they don't want to be a big agency. They decided that we want to be a small agency. I think they're like 800-900 people, like a mid-sized agency that would be.
Yeah. And
it's a deliberate effort that it's coming out of that pain point that, as you go up the ladder, you want to continue doing the work because you get so much better at it.
But is that the difference? Do you think that that's maybe the difference of people who don't end up making good people managers because they want to do more of the work? What would you say?
So in that, so yes, that's a good point. But in that specific model, in the Work & Co model, which I've been following very closely, and I'm a big fan of their work and how they approach culturally, leadership wise, they have all the things that you would want. they encourage. But the thing is, they don't get stuck in like overthinking processes and charts and design thinking. They're actually opposed to all that. They're like, just do the work, do prototyping.
Yeah.
They have like this saying, prototyping over presentations.
Got it.
And so they have like this very, roll up your sleeves, get into the ditches, elbow grease kind of mentality. So it's senior people, and what they pride themselves on is the lowest attrition rate.
Interesting.
Like once people join there, like they're really careful on who they bring in.
Wow, that's
and
really
people
cool.
just don't leave.
That's really cool.
And they have like a heavy emphasis on DEI as well, bringing in diversity, a lot of women partners. And so they have like top heavy firm and it's smaller teams, one project at a time versus one senior person overseeing a couple of projects. Of course, choose what you like.
Yeah.
There's no one better. I'm just more leaning on, stay close to your craft.
Yeah. And I think that that's the thing, right? Like if that's what you want, that's the type of organization you should like find more of those and gravitate towards those. Or if you're more like me, for example, where I don't want to stay close to my craft strategically, yes. And I actually find it more rewarding passing on the skills and teaching others how to do it. So I think it's cool that there's like those two different models and you can kind of just go wherever the wind blows.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
By the way, to be honest, like there's not, I could count on one hand the kind of companies that exist in that format. Number one.
I haven't heard of it
Number
either.
two, even for enterprises like Adobe have like, you can climb up the ladder as an individual contributor.
Yeah.
Because, and I don't want to go too far off into this, but like one quick point is that the incentive structure that we design around our org influences certain behaviors. So now if somebody is a great individual contributor and they're making, let's say 100K, and they want to get a promotion, the only way they can do that is by managing people. Now, even though they might suck at managing people or they don't want to manage people, the incentive structure of how that org is set up is going to influence their behavior to want to do that and start
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful of how the organization is designed, what's the incentive structure, and because that's going to influence the behavior. So instead of telling people to change the behavior, it's important to sort of look at how are people being incentivized and what's behind the behavior that you're seeing. Anyways, I don't want to go too far off.
I sense some changes on that front though. Like I've already been hearing that happening in organizations where I think that realization has happened. And so they're trying to come up with carving out more deeper career paths for ICs. I think that's great.
Right. Yeah. So now you've sort of done this leadership role where you are now actually really tapping into those ideas, and those ideas are what basically pay your salary.
Yeah.
Is having that vision. And of course, the vision and ideas that you put forward translate over time into, top line.
Yeah.
And what that might look in bottom line and all that stuff. So now, what made you get out of that and finally decide, and we're coming back full circle now.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have like a full story arc of who is Nicole, where's she coming from, what influenced her decision making, who were her mentors, Jordan Belfort, dad,
I know.
to some of the...
She's still tall. She's tall throughout the whole thing. Yeah, we have the whole, yeah.
So it's mentally tall and physically tall.
Totally.
So now we've sort of come back full circle to where we started this conversation, where you have now started off your own business.
Yeah. So
let's talk a little bit about that. And then we'll also talk a little bit about your coaching side of things.
Sure.
So the reason I'll give you one place to start. I come across a lot of, and this is just purely anecdotal and also just from personal experiences, but also stuff that I read online, that, guys, even if they don't have the answers, they'll just be like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. Mm-hmm. Whereas women will overthink it.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm just like giving like a massive stereotype here. And that's what, as a starting point, what happens and where should you start and what happened in your case?
Like when I left Bell Curve?
Or what made you leave and think about, or actually wait, at the time when you were leaving Bell Curve, did you know that you were going to start your own thing? Or at that time you just were like, what was happening at that point?
Yeah, actually a lot. So I actually left, I was super burnt out. And so I left in June of last year. It's been about a year. But the March before that, one of my really good friends committed suicide, and I never lost anybody, let alone a good friend or lose someone in that way. And it shook me in a way that like, I couldn't even like comprehend. And I think just, naturally I just kept pushing. I was like, I can do this. Like I've just tried to be strong, right? And just keep going. But then I kind of just like broke, to be honest. I I went away for a weekend with my 3 best girlfriends since high school and dabbled in some magic mushrooms for the weekend. And I actually think those things are incredible because I had an experience that just like, it's kind of like the way I describe it is, when it's like a rainy day, like it's a storm. And then, when the clouds start to break and the sun comes out and everything's still kind of wet, still a little dark, but it's like sunny. That's literally what I felt like happened in my brain. So we didn't do a ton of mushrooms. Like I wasn't crazy hallucinating, anything like that, but we were just like microdosing throughout the day. Right. And the amount of clarity that came to me in that moment. So I think it was a combination of losing Lee and then being with people I was super comfortable with and trying out the whole psychedelic thing. And I just had this clarity of like, what the fuck am I doing? The fuck am I doing? Like I literally was like climbing this corporate ladder. It was great. I learned a lot. It was super rewarding. But I got to this point where I thought that was like my life goal was to be a marketing executive. And I kind of was there. I was making more money than I ever thought I would make. I was VP a lot younger than I ever thought that would happen. And I was still kind of like, like this is it. So I literally went home after that weekend and I resigned because I was emotionally done. And I was like, I knew I could not be the VP that Ian, my boss, wanted me to be for that stage of the company. And I knew it was just not what I wanted anymore. And so I resigned. I gave a month and I just said, I got to go. And so I took 3 months off because I was like, it was the first time in my life where I didn't have everything planned out. Like I didn't have the next job. It wasn't a level up. It was like literally, I don't know, but it's not this. Like, it's not this. And so I just took 3 months to slow down. I enjoyed the summer. It was like one of the first summers out of COVID, basically. So I kind of just enjoyed that. And I think giving myself that space and that clarity is like when some of the other stuff started to form to where I am now. So,
right.
So it was a lot. There was a lot that went into that decision. Yeah.
Wow.
It wasn't like, oh, I have a perfectly good business plan and I'm going to go start this business. It was way different than that. But yeah.
Wow. I'm just blown away. So you left. So first your friend passed away and you were very close to this friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
then after that you went on this, you did microdosing and you got the sun rays and all that happened. And from there you had cleared. A moment of like, you had an epiphany. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if this is sort of a lot of people through the pandemic began to ask themselves, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
And some people went into depression. Some people made the best of it. A handful of you. And in this period for you, of course, it was not the pandemic, but this other thing that triggered this. Yeah. My question is, do you think that you would have had this epiphany, you would have gone down this path had this incident not happened? Or were you actually burned out and you were on the verge to leave, but this triggered that for you?
I don't think it would have happened because I think it put a lot into perspective. Like my friend was one of those people who and I feel like this always happens. It's like the people who commit suicide are like, you would never expect it from them. Do you know what I mean? And they're like the ones who like light up every room they walk into. They're like so just amazing. So I think that was a big like eye-opening experience to me of like, wow, life is short, right? And like, what am I doing? Like, what what is meaningful to me and like what is purposeful to me, and climbing the corporate ladder just wasn't, there were things that were though. Like I think in that job, I got to work with a ton of founders and I got to watch them and help them grow their business. And I was surrounded by entrepreneurship from my dad growing up. And so there were certain things that I did love, like leading people and like coaching people and whatever. So I think I took those experiences, but I'm just like using them in a different way that's more meaningful to me than climbing the corporate ladder and just doing those as default part of my job. Right. So I think that was the shift for me. I don't know that I would have noticed that, or I would have had that like catalyst to really evaluate, like, what the hell am I doing on this planet? Like, what am I here for? I probably just would have kept doing what I was doing.
Right.
Chugging away and like climbing.
I think another thing that you just said, which was beautiful, and I would encourage other people to also sort of think about that, is, you can make plans.
Yeah.
And like you said, this is the first time you didn't have a plan. Two, life is very uncertain and anything can happen, and life is fleeting, as we sort of discussed.
Yeah.
But it's the things that happen to you. It's what's the meaning that you put on that thing? What's the label that you put that changes how, you move forward? Because if you treat that as a very negative, then you could go potentially depressive, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Versus how you sort of put good meaning on it, of course, with the help of some psychedelic mushrooms.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to sort of expand on in some of those experiences and what happened there, or
which part in particular? In
sort of the meaning that you put on through all of this and how you interpreted the whole thing?
Yeah, I think, I don't know. There was a lot that went into it. I think like I felt a lot of shame around leaving. I was only at Bell Curve for 6 months. I've never been at a company for that little of time, especially in that like level of role that I was in. So I felt so bad. Like I felt like I was letting them down, and there was a lot of that. And I think historically I wouldn't have done it because I didn't want to let people down. Right. So it's like all the people pleasing shit comes in. And then you get kind of further and further away when you do that from what you really want to be doing. So I think there was a lot that went into it that didn't feel kind of great in the moment, but I do now, again, looking back on it. And I guess this was happening a little bit in the moment as well, but I think it was like the first time that I just like removed any sense of like titles or salaries or accomplishments or achievements to like define who I was, and like really take time to just figure that out for myself. I will say, because I had such an accelerated career, I did get used to people commending me for that and always like having something to say about it. So it gets a bit addictive. I'm not going to lie. Right. Like, but I think it was just the first time in my life where I'm like, I don't give a shit about that stuff anymore. I don't care. And yeah, I just like, I'm proud of myself now looking back, like for taking and prioritizing myself basically, and not continuing to climb the ladder because that's what I'm supposed to do, or not leaving because I don't want to let these people down. Right. Like just leaning into like what I needed in that moment, I think was, now looking back, really good. Okay.
So we should expand a little bit more on that. But beautiful journey. I mean, because one aspect of what you're saying is that, because you climbed so fast and you were going at it full throttle and you're fully into it, you didn't get a chance to sit back and look at the big picture. And I think from what you're describing, I'm assuming this was your moment where when that sunlight came through the clouds, is where you started to see the big picture, and you're like, I'm okay with just being who I am, period. I don't need these, like you said, I don't need these titles. I don't need this package salary. I don't need any of this stuff. I'm just comfortable with who I am. And I need to define what is important to me and what is my vision and all that stuff. And
I genuinely felt like in that moment when the clouds cleared in my brain, I was like, holy shit. Like for all of my 20s, I was literally like, achieving for other people, whether it was my parents to make them proud, or society because whatever, or my peer group, because I wanted to like inspire people and climb the ladder as fast, all that shit. It was for everybody but me. I don't fucking care if I'm a VP or whatever. I don't care. Right. And so I think when that came, I was like, That's literally what I thought to myself. I'm like, wait, I don't actually care. So instead, but again, grateful though that I like learned all of that and I made the like connections that I did and built the network that I have. I'm just finding now that I'm tuning into more of like what's important to me and like putting those chess pieces together in such a way that feels good to me and not my LinkedIn profile.
So from that point where, and I know we're using the cloud parting and the sunlight coming as like that pivotal point in the story arc, plot twist, is, so at that time, and like you said earlier, at that time you hadn't decided to be starting, you weren't leaving because you wanted to start your own thing. You were leaving because you were burnt out and because of, your friend passing away.
I expected to go back. I literally, when I resigned, I told my manager, hey, I just need 3 months. I'll be back.
And they were okay after you being working there for 6 months.
Yeah. They were super supportive. They were really supportive. And I was like, yeah, I'll be back. And then I realized like, that's not what I want.
Right.
They actually helped me launch my like consulting career. They gave me my first client. They were so supportive actually. Now thinking back, that's really cool of them. But like, yeah, they actually.
Okay. So we should definitely, let's break this apart a little bit more. Mm-hmm. So now you come to terms with, up till now you were living your life for others and you've come to realize that life is fleeting and short and you need to now sort of live for yourself. And what is it that you want to do? Yeah. So now where do you go from there?
Yeah. Yeah. So that started with, I knew I wanted to go back to work. I like what I do. Like I like building businesses and coming up with marketing strategies and helping companies grow. Like I liked what I was doing. I just didn't like how I was doing it or who I was doing it for, I guess is another thing. And so I just leaned into that a little bit. And I literally remember like posting on LinkedIn probably after my like 3-month downtime. I was like, all right, I'm kind of bored. Like, let me like get back into something. And I just posted on LinkedIn like, hey, I don't know what my services are, but like I'm interested in trying out this consulting thing. I know how to do X, Y, and Z. I've worked for companies X, Y, and Z. If any of this sounds relevant or helpful to you, hit me up. And that did really well. Like actually the founder of the agency that I was at, he's super well connected in the whole YC ecosystem and all of that. Shared it, commented about how I was like one of the best people he's ever worked with, and that just blew up because it like, I guess because he reacted to it, it went in front of his whole audience. And I think I had like 50 meetings, discovery calls with 50 different startups and landed on Chopra, which again, Chopra, so Deepak's company, went to Bell Curve to hire Bell Curve. And they were like, the thing that you need is actually Nicole, like, and she's not here anymore. So they just gave them to me, which was really cool.
Wow.
So it was actually, yeah.
You know what the funny thing is? I remember that LinkedIn post.
Do you?
I do.
Yeah.
When you had posted, because I was like, wait, what? And because I remember at some point, Preet and I were, throwback to people listening, Preet and Nicole and I are common friends. Mm-hmm. So I remember seeing that post on LinkedIn. And I remember I had like a quick chat with Preet. We were just generally hanging out, whatever. And so I do remember that LinkedIn post. And this one thing of him sharing the post just demonstrates how you've sort of, that thread has always stayed true, that you focus on connecting the dots, building the relationships, that transparency, all that stuff. And that can only happen if you have those relationships. Yeah. Right? Wow. That is really cool. Okay. So at the beginning, it was just an innocuous sort of LinkedIn post. And now all of a sudden you're inundated with these inbound leads. Yeah. Almost qualified leads. Very qualified leads. They're all like high growth YC startups that want to work with me. And I was like, what is happening? This is really cool. Yeah. And it just, but again, I took the same approach of like, I think I interviewed them as much as they were interviewing me, because I was like, okay, I'm doing this because I want to work on stuff that's meaningful and purposeful. And so I took that approach of like, and again, very fortunate to be in that situation. But I was very deliberate in like who I decided to work with. And I was willing to work up to 3 days a week. I knew I wasn't ready to go back in like full grind, burning myself out all over again. And so it just so happened that
Chopra was the company in that moment I resonated with the most, and I just could really stand behind like what they were doing. And my skill set was exactly what they needed. So it worked out. It just so happened that they needed somebody for that much of time. So I just worked with them.
I don't know how much you're aware of this. You were doing this intuitively, or there was some analytical, because one is that till the time you did this agency role, which you did only for 6 months, you were always on the client side.
Yeah.
So you didn't necessarily have like client facing interactions. Number one. Number two, so when you join an agency, you have a lot of client facing conversations, and depending on sort of how that org is set up, is those early conversations that you're having, with the client, you're trying to qualify the client to see if they're a good fit for you.
Yeah.
And if you are leading that conversation with questions, which you just said, I don't know if you were doing it analytically, intuitively, and you're trying to see, is this person a good fit for me? Yeah. That is what a trusted advisor does, versus a vendor who's an order taker.
Yeah.
Who's like, okay, so what do you want me to do? Okay, I'll do it. Done.
Yeah.
Versus what you were doing, you were like, wait, let me see if this person's a good fit for me, and would I want to work with this person?
Yeah.
So, it's almost like a doctor. A doctor's not trying to get a patient, to give them some medication. They're like, no, I need to see if this patient actually even qualifies.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're like, no, I think you have a brain issue. You need to go see a neurosurgeon.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm really curious, because, this behavior would typically build and happen in an agency environment, especially if you're client facing and you're doing BD work or upfront sales work.
That was most of my work, to be honest. I wasn't doing a lot of growth strategy. I was reviewing the work of our strategists, but most of the time it was pitching new clients and wanting them, like getting them to want to work with us. So maybe that's where it came from.
Right. It's always interesting to know where these little skills and these little habits, because intuitively, if, like you said, you wanted to please people, you were trying to please your parents for a certain reason, whatever. So, if you're trying to qualify a client and you're trying to assess if this is a good fit, you can't be a people pleaser in that moment in time. You have to take that hat off completely.
Right. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And I think for audiences listening, if you have your own independent business or you're client facing, the moment you go in begging and act like, please work with me, that's just going to rub people the wrong way. And people don't like being sold to. So I really like that approach.
It leads to not great working relationships or even like output, I find. But I will say though that like, especially if you're earlier in your career doing freelancing, sometimes you don't have the opportunity to pick and choose, right? Like I used to do email marketing freelancing like way back in the day, and I would just take any client that would hire me because I just thought that was so cool. Right. And so I do want to just like acknowledge that like there is a starting point, and sometimes you kind of have to do that. But as you get more senior, as you get more business and establish yourself in your craft, you get more choice eventually.
Right. So I would actually sort of defer and have a sort of slightly contrarian, sort of not contrarian, but a different view on that.
Yeah.
Even when you're starting out, right, and you're hungry for work, instead of saying, please work with me, go in prepared, just like you did with the VP when you got your first job. Go in prepared, learn a little bit about who this company is, who this person is, ask interesting, informed, curious questions, and that will immediately help you stand out from everybody else.
Yeah.
And that will firstly improve your chances of actually getting the work. Number two, the client will not just see you as a tactful executioner, even if that's what you do. They will be able to have, there's like this halo effect that happens when they see you as somebody who's having an interesting, and you're asking interesting, informed questions based on your own research. You will be able to build rapport and trust more easily.
Yeah.
And so now, even though you're a beginner and you don't have a ton of experience and you don't have a massive portfolio, you're still not saying, please hire me. You're still showing up.
True. Yeah.
With just being a little proactive. And these are the kind of things that you were already doing in those Well.ca days.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's why I never recommend, because these are habits and mindset that you build right from day one.
Yeah, fair.
And not wait to become somebody's senior.
Also, like, I think too, like, don't try to be everything for everybody. Like, I think the earlier on that you can like hone in on who you want to serve and who you want to partner with and collaborate with, brand yourself in that way. because then all that's going to do is attract more people that are in line with what you want to, the type of people you want to work with. And so that also just gets easier, right? I think again, and I was a victim of this as well, like early days is when you start freelancing or working for yourself or whatever it is, you just try to be everything for anyone who will work with you or hire you, right? And it doesn't lead to great productive relationships. So try to like niche yourself a bit.
That's a really good point. Yes, absolutely. I think especially if you're an independent contributor and you're starting out, it's even more reason to get even more niche and specific. I think that's great advice. But all I'm actually saying underneath all of this is just be proactive, be interested, and just don't look at this as another project.
Totally.
And that will just immensely change the tone of how you show up and how you converse with that person. Okay, so cool. So now you're qualified. So you've already got an influx of clients and you're qualifying them, which is this beautiful scenario, which is rare, but you worked and developed those relationships to make this happen, the butterfly effect. So now what's happening? So you've selected Deepak Chopra, the Chopra group. Yeah. So tell us more about what's happening.
Yes, I worked with them for 6 months. I'm still working with them in a small capacity, but I would say I was working with them as my main client for 6 months. And again, just figured out my services as I went. I just kind of assessed the situation, figured out where I could add value, where I couldn't, helped them bring on external partners or other partners. And so, I worked with them. I really enjoy the work because again, I go in as an advisor. I'm not a doer. I go in, I assess the situation. It's what I'm good at, right? Like looking at all the different like chess pieces and helping them figure out where to place bets based on my experience and my knowledge, and have a team of marketers, to go and execute on those strategies. So that to me is my sweet spot. And I set that expectation up front. I'm like, I will not be in there pushing buttons, doing that type of work. Will I build decks? Will I build business cases? Of course, yes. But that is and I actually have gotten that question a lot over the last few weeks of people who want to just do that, but they don't know how to get out of the tactical work. So I would just say, set that expectation up front and look for clients or companies who have 2, 3, depending on the size of companies, but at least 2 to 3 marketers on the ground who can do the work. So I did that. And then the other thing I did was, I was asked to join, a couple accelerators here in Toronto as like a mentor. I think they call them entrepreneur in residence or whatever, and work with a bunch of different founders, of smaller stage companies. So I do that as well, which I find extremely rewarding. I love that work. And some of those have then turned into clients after the accelerator program and things like that. So that is kind of my like consulting business where it's very specific to strategic work and advisory work. And I'm still doing that to this day.
So when you work with a client like Chopra and you're like, you got to set that expectation up front, are there specific kind of conversations or things or themes that you need to express to help make the life of the client easy in putting you in that box of like, oh, I need this person upstream to help me get through are there certain things that you're saying or ways you're showing up to be positioned in their mind as an expert who is going to help them with the strategic thinking versus the doer who they can maybe find on Fiverr? Are there what?
That's actually how I position it, is like, even if I were to do the work or do the execution work, you're going to pay me way too much to do that. Like, you are better to pay me for my thoughts and my strategy and my thinking power, than me doing the work. Like, it's more economical for you to pay me in that way and get someone way more affordable to actually go and execute on these strategies. Otherwise, you're going to be paying a lot, more than you would need to. So that's one way I position it. And then I think the other way I position it is it's honestly just comes to like down to setting very clear expectations. Even if you're not like executive level coming in advising on like the overall organization structure or growth strategy or whatever, let's say you're an email marketer and you're tired of sending emails, but you love the strategy behind it, just position yourself that way. Say, hey, I'm actually really strong at the strategic side. Here's some examples of some of the work or the types of projects I typically work on. I only work with clients who have at least one email marketing coordinator or specialist or whatever on the ground so that they can support the strategies I'm going to build for you. So I think it's just like setting those expectations up front. And again, not trying to be everything to everybody. So I think that people fall into that trap of like, oh my God, well, if I don't do the work, are they going to not hire me? Maybe, but then if they hire you, you're going to be doing work that you don't want to do. So then why did you go out on your own in the first place? You know?
So now I don't know what the scale and size of Chopra Group was and the team that you were specifically, or the stakeholders that you were working with. Now, because you are an outside consultant and you've been brought in to coach and guide the teams, there's probably egos, there's probably other challenges, and they see you as like this, who is this person, right? And sometimes, being a woman can also be sometimes seen as a negative, so when you're in these kind of course, you're qualifying and, you're working with the decision maker, but the decision maker might not be involved in the day-to-day strategy stuff that you're doing with maybe other leaders and building the frameworks or the processes, whatever. Are there certain things that you keep in mind or are doing to help facilitate that? Any past experiences that carry forward in these contexts that come to mind for you?
Relationship building again. Like that's one of the first things I did when I joined. They didn't have a VP of marketing. So I was filling that role, helping them figure out what the organizational structure needed to look like for where they wanted to go, what like roles were like immediate priority hires, helping find those people, reevaluating all the different channel strategies to see what was working, what wasn't, et cetera. But marketing often touches everything, right? So like one of the first things I did was make really strong relationships with the VP of sales, VP of education, the CFO, CEO, like all those people. So that when I was coming to the table to get their buy-in or need their buy-in on something, we had that trust and that foundation built. So I would just say that that's another common thread that's even coming to life now, which helped me get into consulting in the first place, was because of those relationships I made throughout my corporate career. But now that I'm in consulting, like relationships are like, if not, maybe even more important now. Right? Because you're just some random person coming in, not random, but you know what I mean? You're an external person coming in. You don't have that history that some of the other full-time employees do. So like establishing trusting relationships as soon as possible is super important, I would say.
Right. Because you're also outside of their like politics, their red tape and all that stuff.
You still get
and it also depends on of course, it obviously depends on the size of the organization, but is there any one tactic or thing that you do to come off as non-threatening? Because that's a big hump, that first meeting, because a lot of people feel threatened when, the boss, the owner is bringing in this because they feel like, wait, or was that because we don't even know what the internal decision-making was to bring in? Was there a collective buy-in that we need an external partner? Versus it was just an executive decision made by the owner. So are there any like things that you do to come off as non-threatening? Any little things that you might do in terms of the way you send an email or the way you say hello that could be helpful for somebody else?
Yeah, I think one of the things I did was I wanted everyone to feel like I was there to help them, like not help the CEO and the CFO achieve what they're doing, potentially at the like cost of maybe others and how they felt about their role. But like literally like every single person I met with, whether it was the VP of sales, all of my questions and conversations were directed on how can I help you do your job better, enjoy your work better, collaborate better with marketing, get what you need out of marketing, et cetera. So I always made it about them. It wasn't about me. And it was also just like really good information gathering, right? It helped me build the relationships, figure out like where the fires were and like what needed to be addressed. But I think when you come at it from that angle and genuinely, I was genuinely doing it. It was not like a front. I genuinely wanted to know how I could help all these people as much as possible. I think they see you as a partner and not somebody coming in to totally disrupt everything. And it could be the smallest thing too of like, I remember when I first joined Chopra, meeting with all the ICs and just being like, hey, what part of your job do you hate? Like what sucks? What is taking up way too much time? Where's the friction points working with other teams? Like, and just really understanding like what all those pain points are. And like, when you let them vent and talk about that stuff, they're like, oh my God, finally someone's listening. I might not have had solutions to all of it, but it was like painting that bigger picture of like, okay, I'm here to support all of you in some capacity. I think that goes a long way.
So is there something that you're doing to help them overcome their fear of sharing some of those things? Because they might be like, oh, wait.
Yeah, I just remove the emotion out of it for myself and also for them. I'm like, I'm an external consultant. I'm not going to be here for forever. I'm not your manager. You don't have to worry about upsetting me. Like, I'm literally going to be here for 3 to 6 months. So put it all out on the table, because that allows me to make better decisions and do the right thing. If you keep things from me, I don't have all the information to make the best decision possible. So that's how I kind of went about it. And even for myself, I removed emotion out of it big time compared to being a full-time employee somewhere. I knew that like, I wasn't going to be here forever. I was like, you know what I mean? And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it was just like, it's one of those things that I was there to do a job, and I wanted to build strong relationships along the way and have an impact. But sometimes you get really emotionally attached to your full-time role and your job, right? And the place you work. But I think with consulting and coming at it from that angle, you don't really do that as much. So that helped.
I think there's a couple of things here. And obviously this is your first consulting client?
Yes, in this capacity as an advisor.
Right,
yeah.
Right. And so, you're sort of, because you're coming in at that executive level, you have to sort of navigate egos. You have to come off as non-threatening, and you have to help people overcome their fear of sharing things, which are ultimately the things that you need to fix.
Yeah.
Right. And there's always like this apprehension and fear of like, oh wait, is this person going to go behind my back and tell the boss? So I think I like some of the ways that you sort of tackled some of those situations that, hey, look, I'm going to be gone, blah, blah, blah.
So here to help.
Right. So that's really cool. There's some good learnings and things to take away, especially for people who are trying to maybe build a bridge with a foreign team, or they're coming in cold to this new context, or even if you get moved to a new team, new city, and you have to now, so how do you build that bridge? Be the least threatening person and be transparent. I think that's a common thread that you've had in your career.
Yes, but I'm going to say one thing. I actually think it's okay to be a little bit threatening, like not intentionally. If you are coming at it and building these relationships genuinely and just being a human at the end of the day, great, do that. But you're also being brought in as a consultant for a reason. Something's not working, something's broken. And in Chopra's case, I'll just be honest, there wasn't enough clear direction. There wasn't enough firm decisions being made, people like anchoring in something and going for it. So I had no problem doing that, right? Like I came in, I was hired to do that. So you kind of do have to come in a certain capacity, even though you're not trying to be threatening. I probably came off as threatening in some capacities, because it's like, who is this new person coming in making all these decisions, and she doesn't even work here full time, right? But I think that just kind of comes with the role a little bit. But if you can balance that with just being a genuine good human being and like building trust and asking the right questions, that's what I think actually the balance you need to have to be a good consultant, because you can't just go in there and people please and do what everyone else wants you to do. That's not why they hired you. Right.
If I was to expand what you said, how much is this more about challenging them versus threatening them? Because threatening is very different.
Fair.
Because the moment you threaten somebody, they're going to shut off and that's just like very primal biology, human sort of. I don't know. I don't have the answer. Actually, I'm wondering.
Yeah.
And I'm asking actually, because you might have a better sense of this. One is, I think it's important to challenge people, but not threaten them. And number two, part of that is when you're sort of going in these situations and you're trying to learn about their problems and pain points, there's a whole change management piece to this, and change management is difficult because people don't like changing the way they've been doing things a long time. So my sense and intuition saying that this is more about challenging them, but in a way that they feel comfortable and they're not threatened. So they don't have fear. I don't know what your take is on that.
I think that's actually a very interesting point, because I think you're 100% right. Challenging them even, and sometimes when I hear challenge, it's like, you're wrong. Like, that's not even challenge. It's just like, have we thought about it this way? What if we come at it this way? Right. So it's like challenging them to think about problems in a different way, giving them a new perspective, doing it in a way within your control that would not result in them feel threatened. However, you can't control how they react, right? So some people might feel threatened as a result of you challenging them to think about things in different ways. So that's actually a really interesting nuance. Yes.
Yeah.
Feeling threatened is a reaction to being challenged. How you go about challenging people, you can do that in a way that decreases the likelihood of somebody responding.
Love
threatened.
it.
You know what I mean?
Love it. Yes. That's the thing. It's like, you know, even in my personal experiences, like how do you come off as the least threatening person and you're genuine and honest and transparent and interested in having a conversation with that person and not just like, oh, how was your day? Which is like such a nonsensical sort of like filler word sort of thing that people do all the time. But and challenging them not by personally attacking them, but to your point, have we thought about it like this way? Why doesn't that work? And just being like genuinely curious, like a child, like looking at it like as a child would look at something. Wait, how come we don't do it like this?
Or why did we do it like that? And it's not because I think we did it wrong, but I'm just genuinely curious. What went into this approach? Why did we do it this way? What did we learn? Right. And so, it's asking those questions. And so if I were to rephrase, actually, this is really good that you pointed this out. I would say as a consultant, your job is to challenge how that company has historically thought about things in the least threatening way possible.
Yeah. Cause it's like, that's how we've always done it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, it's not working. That's why I'm here. So let's think about it a different way. Right. So
Beautiful. Okay. So now you're working with this first client. And now if we were to sort of fully circle back and come back to your present state, what are you working on these days? And in terms of the tall size, if you want to talk a little bit more about that, and then the coaching part.
Sure.
Actually, let's start with the coaching part because that's a good segue from where we are right now.
Yeah, for sure. So, so that's kind of the consulting, like I said, more tactical, strategic, whatever, helping them achieve a particular measurable end goal, I would say. On the coaching front, this is like a new thing for myself, but I think since it's been about a year since I went out on my own, I've done some reflecting and I'm like, oh man, like I've learned a lot along the way, or there's stuff that I think I can teach other people who either want to climb, if the corporate thing is for you and you want to accelerate your growth, cool. I have a lot of learnings I can share with you. Or if you're looking to make the jump to go out on your own as a consultant, or you want to start your own business in whatever capacity, I'm just starting to share some of my like experiences in real time. I think I haven't done that before. I've done a lot of like behind closed doors. If I know you, cool. Like let's have a really cool, meaningful chat like this. But I've recently like had a realization that I'm like, man, I feel like I have a lot to offer. Like I have a lot to share and I'm like not helping anybody by like keeping it to myself. So here I am. Another reason why I was excited about this, but I would just say coaching. I recently hired a coach for myself because I knew I had a lot of like limiting beliefs, I would say, up here of what I was capable of. And I just wasn't thinking big enough for myself. And she really helped me work through that. So that's been a really cool experience. And I think just since I've shared a little bit more openly, mostly as of recently on LinkedIn, just had a lot of women reaching out being like, hey, like, what do you think about this? Or how do you think about this? And so just starting to work with those women in more one-to-one ways and guiding them through these things that I've been through myself is just happening kind of. So I'm still, again, figuring that out as I go, but that's where I'm at on the coaching front.
I'll just start with like something super basic. Is this like a life coach, a business coach? What kind of coaching were you seeking and how did you even get to the idea?
My coach?
Yeah, your coach. How did you even get to the idea of like getting a coach? Like,
good question. Yeah. So there's a woman I follow on Instagram, Rachel Melinda. She owns her own business, or she's owned her own business for a while. I followed her for a while. And she actually was like a intuitive eating coach, I think was her title, or how she branded herself. And she helped women with eating disorders. And there was just like a certain way this woman like carried herself on social media that I was just like, whoa, I was just drawn to her. I was like, whoa, she is like powerful. And she started to share some of the things she was learning from this coach. And I got intrigued. I started following the coach, whatever. And then the coach, Catherine Farquharson, I don't know how to say her last name. Anyways, I call her CF. She was doing a free masterclass. And I was like, you know what, let me go try it out. Like, let me just see what this is all about. And I was hooked right after that. And the cheapest investment to work with her is $10,000 for 6 months. I had never spent that much money on something like this before. And so, but it was a very scary decision. But it was also a no-brainer at the same time. And ever since then, I've been working with her now in an even like more intimate capacity, which has been cool. And she is a mindset coach. She is not a business coach. She says, she's like, I'm not going to be able to give you tactical, strategic advice and whatever. She's like, I'm going to help you reflect, look inward, ask yourself the right questions, and really just like get over a lot of those humps that we all have and like blocks we have in our own brains.
So scary in the moment of signing up and totally worth it looking back.
Game changer.
Right. Okay, fantastic. So now I don't know how comfortable you are talking about any of the things. Of course, they're probably very personal things, but if there is any one thing that you would call, maybe let's say to your words, limiting belief, that you've overcome in the last few months. Is there anything that you feel comfortable sharing with, and you feel that a lot of other women who might be listening to this have?
Yeah. One thing I've noticed recently, and this, I kind of just touched on this, is that when I have one-on-one conversations with people that I just happen to know, and they ask me questions and I share some of the stuff I've shared today, I know they take a lot away from it. I can feel that they take a lot away from it, and it's helpful. But I never had the confidence to go beyond those one-on-one closed door conversations. I didn't want to be like too out there or too much, or like, who am I to talk about this stuff, right? And I would say that's actually one thing she's helped me work through, is that it's just like all I'm doing is sharing my experience, right? My story, what's worked for me, what didn't work for me. And I think I got really hung up on like, but is that the right way to do things? Like, should you do that? Should you not? But then I think I had a recent realization of like, who gives a shit? It worked for me. If it lands with you, cool. If it doesn't, cool. So I think just showing up in a bigger way and being able to help more people as a result. Because before I was like, I was trying to just stay, I was shrinking, to be honest, to keep people comfortable. Like, cause I know as soon as I start sharing more, if I post too much, or the other day I posted my salary openly, and I'm like, I know my dad's going to text me about this and say, you're not supposed to talk about I know that. And I know it's going to make some people uncomfortable, but the people it's making uncomfortable aren't really the people I'm trying to help, is what I'm realizing, right? Like the women that like flooded my DMs after being like, oh my God, since you're sharing so transparently, like, what do you think? How do you think I can make this jump? Or how did you negotiate? Like all these things that like I can now help them. Or even I had one message yesterday of like, yo, thanks for sharing that, because it's actually cool to see a woman your age making that much money. I didn't know that was possible. So like, I need to like, that's one like hump I've gotten over, is like, fuck what all those other people have to say, because I don't think those are the people I'm trying to serve. As long as like I can help the people I'm trying to help, then why not? Right. And so I guess if I were to summarize, like, don't shrink yourself to make people around you comfortable. Expand where you want to expand, and help others if you can along the way.
One thing that I'm sort of taking away from this is that she's helping you accept who you are and double down on that, number one. And be like, yeah, don't hold back. Just go all in. And then two, another thing that I'm sensing is that it's helping you get more closer and getting more grounded with your own inner reality, and let that reflect outwards. I don't know how much that is this, or maybe I'm just over-analyzing this, but that's the feeling that I'm getting. And that's giving you that confidence from within and not seeking external validation, because you no longer care about those titles, whatever, because it's coming from within.
Yeah.
So you're just doing it because you want to do it. And now that external validation is almost like detached from the thing that you're doing. I don't know how much that is.
I think that's bang on, because what's interesting about her program and the work that she makes you do, it's a lot of work. And I'm not going to lie, it's every single day. It's reflecting, journaling, listening to, it's a lot of work, but all of it, what I noticed, it all comes back. I've never been so clear on what I want. And it's funny because the very first, her course over the 12 weeks, each week is a different module. The very first week is just getting clear on what you want. And she talks about these things that's like A type, B type, and C type goals. A lot of people have A type goals, which they know exactly how to achieve. And it's just like, it's like checking off a to-do list, and it makes you feel good about yourself. B type goals, you're like, I know I can do it. I could go this way or this way. I'm not sure which one's going to be the best, but let me try. I'm going to get there eventually, right? It's still very realistic. She encourages us to think of like C type goals, which are like, holy crap, I have no fucking clue how I'm going to do this. No idea. Because it's so big and it's so audacious. But when you reflect enough and ask yourself the question enough of what do I actually want? Like, what am I envisioning when I think about my life in 10, 15, whatever it is, right? She's like, those are the things you need to set your eyes on and start chasing after. So it's a lot of looking inward. It's a lot of what do I want? Not, oh my God, okay, I need to be like 30 under 30 Forbes list, or like I have to do all these things that other people are telling me to do. So that I would say is, and not a lot, I don't think enough people, men and women, all types, I don't think people spend enough time getting really clear on what they as a human want for themselves, not their parents, not their friends, not society. So that's actually been, I think, the biggest game-changing thing. And then as soon as you're clear on that, everything you do gets you closer to that, right? The people you talk with, the people you surround yourself with, the opportunities you go after, the way you carry yourself, the way you dress, like everything just slowly but surely brings you closer to that because you know exactly where you're going. Otherwise, you kind of just like float around.
I love it. I love this. I'm so glad that, firstly, that you met the right coach, because there's a lot of shitty coaches out there as well.
I know.
Right?
First time too. Like yeah.
Right. So I think number one, I'm so glad that you found a good coach.
Yeah.
And number two, you're right. A lot of people spend so much time fixing the outside, the external world, whereas 99, like, and this is like a sort of a slight quick off tangent, but you know how people say that, you know, money solves only money problems and blah, blah, blah. But that's not true at all. I completely disagree, because a child born in a poor family where you're not sure where the next meal is coming from versus a child who's born in a nurturing environment where they have all the facilities and they have this abundance mindset is going to be very different. And how is that solving money problems? Mm-hmm. That's solving psychological problems and money problems and shaping who you are. Anyways, I don't want to divulge too far down that path unless you want to talk a little bit more about that. But I'm really fascinated by psychology and how things work and epigenetics and, you know, some of that, but obviously not hardcore biology. But the other piece that you talked about, all of these sort of different things are helping you find your voice. And I don't just mean, you know, the podcast that we're recording over here, but really speaking from here.
Yeah. And I still don't know. I think that's like the experimental phase I'm in right now, is just like flexing that muscle a little bit, because I don't think I've flexed it enough. Yeah. Again, I flex it a lot behind closed doors. Like, you asked me a question, I won't stop talking, but I felt actually, you know what? I was like, I feel like I can, that's why this episode is going to be 8 hours long, because I could talk all day, literally. But it's like, I just had this like deep feeling when I was thinking about what I wanted and where I wanted to go and the impact I wanted to make. It's like, I can be helping so many more people than I am. Who am I? I'm not serving anybody by like being quiet and only sharing this stuff when I'm asked a question, right? So I think I'm still like, what's the saying, getting my sea legs a little bit, of sharing more frequently and openly. And I'm also trying to just share from like what I think is helpful or what's been helpful for me, and take feedback, but mostly look at what questions people are asking me to inform the type of stuff I share. Not like, oh, that got this many likes and this, and like historically that's how I operated. So I'm trying very, very, very hard to not look at that as validation and feedback, but more so look at the types of questions that are coming back and things that people want me to go deeper on, and using that to kind of guide me, if that makes sense.
That is such a good point, because your whole career, you are literally in a habit, and you got into this mental habit and it becomes a physicality, is you're constantly measuring the results of your email campaign. Yeah. And now you're like constantly testing how your content is doing. But I think one exercise that's really helpful is to separate yourself from your content and analyze the feedback on the content, but not what it means to you. Yeah. Look at your content that you're putting out as a product and separate it from yourself. That's really helpful.
I brought this question to my coach last week because for my business tall size, but it's actually mostly on the tall size front. I don't feel it as much with just the stuff I'm sharing from myself personally, but I was like, how do I not care about the metrics? I think it's just so ingrained in who I am and the types of roles I've had previously. And she's like, just don't look at them. I'm like, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean? And she's like, just don't look at them for 2 months and see what happens. And I was like, but how am I going to know if it's working? And she's like, don't look at them. So I'm trying that right now. I'm going to see what happens. But my comeback to that was like, okay, well, I look at the metrics because I'm paying someone to run my social media. I'm paying someone to help us with SEO. I want to make sure that like they're doing their jobs and like things are moving in the right direction. She's like, so trust them to do their jobs. They can look at the metrics. They can tell you qualitatively what's working, what's not working. You don't need to look. I'm like, true. I do think I still need to look at the metrics, obviously, every now and again, but not obsessed with over them, like almost daily, like I was before. So
right. Yeah.
Work in progress.
Right. Yeah. Look at it. You're looking at more from the lens of how do I make more content that resonates versus getting obsessed with likes and exactly. So I think the way you put it is you're looking at the questions that are coming back versus the likes.
Exactly.
And that tells you if the content is resonating or not. Mm-hmm. I love that. I really like that. In fact, anybody who's trying to be a content creator and start to put themselves out there, that's a really good framework to have, mental framework to have, is to look at, even if it's one person that is your authentic fan and is asking genuine questions, double down on that.
Yeah.
Love it. So, okay. So now you've sort of going through this coaching journey, and I'm guessing this is going to be an ongoing thing for you.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know. It's still so new, to be honest, like literally this past month. So I'm going to help where I think I can help and like what feels good and just see what happens with it. Right.
So just one quick question about this coaching aspect before we sort of switch topics a little bit, switch gears. Mm-hmm. Are there any things that you've come across during this whole coaching period with the person that you're working with that you find very difficult to do and are having a hard time sort of overcoming? And if you want to talk about it, you don't have to. It could be very personal. I understand. Mm-hmm. But is there anything that is very difficult to do or you found initially very difficult to do, but now you're like, oh, it's so obvious?
I think a lot of it, like at least in the way she coaches, is it challenges like all of your paradigms, all of the ways that you've been programmed as a human being. She basically tells you to do the opposite, like flip it on its head and see what happens. So that I think has been the most challenging part, is like unlearning all of that stuff that doesn't happen overnight. Right. And I think I've made some progress on the surface level of starting to peel back some of those layers and reprogramming it to work for me and not, you're programmed by your parents and society and your friends and whatever, right? And like, I think for me, my focus right now is like, how do I unlearn that stuff and reprogram myself in a way that works for me and my loved ones around me, right? Obviously, it's not all about me. So that's been difficult. And I actually finished the first 6 months with her and then hired her in a one-on-one capacity and not just the group coaching stuff because I felt like I made progress on the surface level, but I'm like, there's some deep shit in there that I need to go into. And unless somebody is holding me accountable and like pushing me there, I won't do it. So I still don't think I've made progress on that, but that's kind of where I'm at right now, is like, there's so many things I want to ask her about, but I almost don't. Like I do this almost every day. I want to go voice note her something. I'm like, oh my God, don't be stupid. That's a stupid question, Nicole. Or like, you're better than that. You can figure that out. But I think it's like pushing myself to ask those questions because there's something there, right? Maybe it's because I don't want the answer or I don't want the solution that I think she's going to give me and I avoid it. So that's really my focus right now, is just like going into those like super uncomfortable places.
Wow. There's so much to unpack there. But
yeah,
before I do any of that, one thing is, you know how we were talking about initially consulting, challenging. That's literally what your coach is doing.
She's challenged every single
and you're
day.
her biggest fan. So she's not threatening you. She's having uncomfortable, difficult conversations, which, you know, hit a nerve and are probably really painful, some of them. And like you just said, you know, there's some things that you don't want the answers to. So
she literally, like, I'm going to share this example because I think it's so interesting. So I have this consulting thing that I'm doing. I don't have a website. I don't have anything that outlines my services. Like, I don't. If people reach out to me, I'm like, let me just chat and have a conversation and see what you can help with. And I kind of just riff off of it. Right. And I voice noted her the other day and I was like, Catherine, I'm working on, because I am launching a website because I do want to have like a physical presence beyond just my LinkedIn. But I'm like, oh, I need a services page. And I was like, I like had so much resistance to it. And I was like, Catherine, how do I do this? I don't want to do this, blah, blah, blah. But okay, like, I guess I'll structure it this way. And I was just kind of asking her for feedback. Cause I'm like, how did you work through this in your business? Like, how do you explain to people what a mindset coach is going to get you? Like, that's super ambiguous. And I felt like the work I was doing, cause it's so broad, was pretty ambiguous. And her response to me was like, do you need one? And I was like, what do you mean? Do I need one? Of course I need one. Everyone has a services page. She's like, I don't think you need one. She was like, people know who you are. People know what you can do. You've worked this long and this hard to establish a reputation for yourself. I think if you put a services page on your website, you're actually going backwards. And I was like, got it. So that landed with me because there was obviously resistance there. I didn't want to do it. And I'm still working through that. My website still isn't launched. I don't know what that looks like, but I know I was trying to put myself into this box of what everyone has a services page, right? But I'm like, nah, fuck that. I don't want to do that. So it's interesting. She literally just challenges every single thing I come to her with.
Just from the way you described how you qualify the client and you're picking, that tells me so much about the kind of person you are. Mm. And then 2, there is this false sense of like, oh, you need like a pretty portfolio page website to get good clients and get charged a lot. Not the case at all. Because referrals trump everything else, number 1.
Yeah.
And number 2, who is giving the referral to who? Yeah. If it's a CEO saying, get Nicole, nobody's going to ask you for your portfolio or the work that you've done. And that's something that a lot of people miss.
That's literally what I ended up doing. Instead, I was spending so much time trying to figure out what my different packages were and all this shit. And when she said that to me, I was like, okay. And I literally just went and emailed everybody I've worked with in a significant capacity, most of which are fairly senior people. And I was like, hey, can you just write about your experience working with me? And everyone was so happy to do it. And I'm like, I'm just going to put those in that's there, like book some time with me if you want to learn more, but like that, let that just speak for itself. So that was like a very interesting learning I had.
Yeah. I would totally advise this for, people listening who maybe are starting their own independent thing is you don't need all that fluffy crap. If you can get referrals, focus on getting referrals and having other people talk about you. That is going to do way better and be more efficient and get you much better prices versus cost. A lot of people focus on cost versus price, but love it. I love sort of how you sort of summarize that. And I can, just by you saying how you qualify the client is like those early conversations, because that's where you're setting the tone with the client. And that's where that expectation is being set by just you qualifying them. You're setting the expectation without even setting the expectation. Yeah. So there's a lot of sort of underlying communication happening there. Love it. Okay. So now sort of coming back to where you are now. And so clearly you've seen the benefits of having a great coach and that person is helping you unlock all of this stuff that was inside you and helping you see things differently. And then that frame of thinking, of bringing different perspective and challenging you, uncovering hidden gems and truths and uncomfortable areas. And that could totally translate over into the consulting work that you're doing with clients and how you challenge versus threaten. And
it's all just questions, literally. Like my coach doesn't tell me what to do. She's not like, Nicole, you must not have a services page. She just asks me things like, do you need one? Do you? Do you have referrals? Do you have, and same with like, and when I think about like you just said, consulting's the same. It's like, why did we do it that way? Have we thought about it this way? And even it's funny when I think about my own people management approach and some of the women I'm mentoring right now, one woman comes to mind and she always comes to me when she's like negotiating her salary for her next role or whatever. And she had all these job opportunities and she came to me for advice. And I think she wanted me to tell her like, okay, well, based on like market potential and like revenue and the size of the company and where they're like, how fast they're growing, you should go here. But I didn't. I just kind of like, I think took that same learning of like asking the types of questions to help her just figure out like what feels good to her, right? And what's most in line with like what she wants. And so when she actually wrote me my testimonial that I asked her for, it came down to like, she wrote something like that. Like Nicole doesn't tell you what you want to what you're supposed to do. She asks you like interesting, introspective questions to help you get there on your own, so I think I've learned that, especially recently working with my coach. But that's all it is just asking people questions, because everyone has the answer they need, really.
I think this holds true for coaches, mentors, teachers, is not telling people what to think, but how to think.
Yeah.
And that's getting curious, which you are, and reframing that thing. And then also, what's the label that you're putting on that thing based on those past experiences, whether good or bad. Really. Love it. Okay. So now this is a perfect segue into tell us a little bit about I actually want to know a little bit more about the coaching stuff that you're doing with your clients. And if there's somebody out there who's listening to this or watching this, why would they come to you, and what are you helping other women or other people sort of do?
Still figuring that out, if I'm being honest. I would say, why would they come to me?
Let's reframe that. Why have they been coming to you and sticking around?
Yeah, I think they just see what I've accomplished. They see something in me that they want to achieve for themselves. And I think that that's bang on. And I've done that myself in my career, right? Like if I see someone who has the title I want, or the job that I want, or the client I want, or someone's built a business that I just find a way to connect with them, right? So I think that the more I share about my experiences and whatnot, I think that that's just going to attract naturally people who see something in me that they want to achieve themselves. So I actually think it's an amazing move to try to like get closer to somebody who's done it and learn from them, right? So I would say that's one thing. And then I also just think like the other benefit, and just in general, of having a mentor or a coach or whatever you want to call it, is they can ask you those tough questions, but they're also 9 times out of 10 more well-connected than you are. They've achieved more, they know more people. And if they see something in you, they work with you, they know what you want, like that can also just help accelerate where you got to go, right? There's a woman that comes to mind. I interviewed her like 5 years ago for an email marketing role, and I didn't give her the job. She had recently immigrated to Canada from India, and she didn't have enough work experience in the moment. We stayed in touch over LinkedIn and stayed connected. And then I guess when I made the jump out to do my own consulting, she reached back out and was like, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but and I was like, yeah, I totally remember you. And she asked if we could jump on a call, and I met with her, and she kind of shared where she was at. She was feeling burnt out. She had like acquired a ton of experience in the last like 4 years or whatever, and was now a specialist in her field in email marketing. And I just so happened to need to hire somebody as a contractor at Chopra to do that work to support my strategies, right? So I just hired her, And so it's like, had she have not reached out to me and almost kind of leaned on me in that like mentorship capacity, maybe, and now she's out on her own doing her own consulting because Chopra was her first client and allowed her to do that, right? So it's like having somebody in your corner to ask you the tough questions, to connect you with opportunities that you might not have otherwise gotten, and coaching you on those types of things around like how to price yourself properly, I think accelerates all those things that you want to do. Yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Cool. No, that is really helpful. Are there particular kind of people that you like prefer working with? Yeah,
I'll just say who they are. I don't know yet. I like working with all of these people. It's still so early, like literally.
Of course, yeah.
Last couple of months, so I don't really know yet, but like who I'm finding is reaching out and who I'm able to provide value to is women trying to accelerate their corporate career and get higher salaries, get better titles, more responsibility, et cetera, is one. And then I think the other big one I'm noticing right now is people who feel that nudge to go out on their own, but they don't know how. And so they typically have quite a bit of experience working for other companies. And they're trying to just figure out like, how do I position myself as a consultant or an advisor? Those I would say from the coaching capacity are the types of people I work with. And then the consulting, who I really enjoy working with, are female founders, like other women building businesses and figuring it out, right? So those are kind of like the 3 arenas I would say, or types of people.
Okay, that's actually super helpful. So the overarching theme is, one is, helping and enabling women to climb the corporate ladder, or get to that position or that desired role.
Accelerate it. Honestly, accelerate it.
Put fuel on it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one. And you have such great experiences. And in fact, we talked about some of them already on this podcast. The second thing is women, and I know a lot of them, and I'm going to be so excited to share this with them as well, is helping them get out of that 9 to 5 and chase that dream, that passion project that they wanted to do, whether it be write a book, or do create products, whatever that thing is. So those are your two sort of ideal people that you would want to work with, and where you can bring the maximum value.
Yeah, I think so. Just based on my own personal experience. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. Great. And so this coaching arm of what you're doing, is there like a name to it? So how do people find you if they want your help?
Right now, LinkedIn, but I'm working
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm just on my LinkedIn profile. But I am working on a website. It'll be with Nicole.co. So I bought the thing so whether it's like coaching with Nicole or like marketing or whatever it is, like, I'm just kind of leaving it open-ended because I know myself as a human, I will evolve. So maybe it's pottery with Nicole in 30 years from, I don't know, but I just wanted to make it open-ended, and then I can just kind of like structure what it is I have to offer as I myself evolve over time. So I have the domain, but if you go to it right now, there's nothing there.
No worries. In fact, so what we'll do is in the show notes, we'll put all the links for Nicole's social media profile, including LinkedIn, and you can reach out to her. And she'll know if you listen to this podcast, because she described how to reach out to people at the beginning of this podcast. Okay. So now, are there any other final or lingering thoughts in terms of this coaching aspect of what you're doing?
I don't think so. I'm just being honest and vulnerable and transparent, and that I'm still figuring it out myself as I go. So like,
love it.
I don't know. And it could change, it could evolve. I'm just being super honest when people reach out, and if I think I can help them, I do. If not, like, I'll try to connect them, or if I can't, like, I'm just honest about it. So
fantastic. Okay. So
work in progress to be determined.
This is good because I don't know if this is the right analogy, but this is like the growth mindset. You're constantly learning, evolving, and you're curious. And I think those are all the right ingredients in progress, because that's one of the most core thing to a human is, if you're not making progress, then you're actually going backwards. And that progress could be as tiny as, just doing that one thing that you needed to do. It's not the size, but it's just taking that one little nudge and step, nudge, step, push, shove. I think there's some analogy like that.
And I would say that you want to do, not because I think I got addicted to progress that other people wanted me to do, or progress in other people's definitions.
Coming from the right place.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. I agreed. Absolutely. And I think the journey that you've described is over this time. Firstly, you're trying to find your center point, getting grounded in your own reality, and not seeking external validation or even the things that you're doing day to day is coming from this honest place, but from within. Totally. So we're actually, I think, like 2.5 hours in.
This is like a Joe Rogan podcast. Doesn't he talk for like 3 hours?
Yeah.
I've never actually listened to any of his podcasts, but this is cool. Now I get like that. It makes sense. You could go on all day.
I swear to God, this literally felt like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can open up so many other topics here, but I have to be sort of cognizant of.
We can always do like a
part two.
Yeah.
Yes. We'll definitely be doing a part 2. But the final segment of this podcast is sort of, you're working on this startup called Tall Size. Let's dive a little bit into that, and then after that, we'll summarize and close for today.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it super high level. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's just obviously this theme that has carried out through my entire life. I'm tall. There's a lot of body image issues and challenges that come along with being a tall woman, as well as practical problems of finding clothes that fit your body, right? And we all know how good it feels when you got a banging outfit on and you just like carry yourself differently, right? But when you've got to shop in the men's section, or you can't wear trendy or cute or feminine clothes because they don't make them for you, it just makes you feel even shittier, or like it adds to those body image issues that tall women face. So the whole reason myself and my co-founders started this company was to solve that problem. And literally, yes, it's manifesting itself right now in the way of clothing, but like our vision is way bigger. We just want to serve this community of tall women because they're just completely, it's funny, they're overlooked. Not really in the like physical sense, you can see them, but in fashion and in so many areas of life, they're not thought about enough. And so we're trying to be that company or the people who do that. And so we built Tall Size, which is right now an online shopping platform, marketplace, whatever you want to call it. We aren't fashion designers. We don't design our own clothes. I'm like more of like the tool, like how do I build something to solve this problem? So we built a tool to basically partner with a bunch of brands, bring all of the items onto our site. So, you know, when you're shopping on tallsize.com that everything is made for you. And we plan to grow it over time to like IRL, like in real life meetups and retreats and pop-up shops. And like, there's so many things that we want to do to just bring everyday normal shopping experiences that most people get to tall women. Eventually we might release our own line of clothing and stuff like that. We'll just kind of see where it goes, but that's the community we want to serve.
Wow. So two things. One is, of course, you've had this personal challenge your whole life, but is that the only reason why you started Tall Size, or are there more sort of things that sort of catapulted you into this sort of startup? Two, you're talking about community. So that I mean, I would love to know what your sort of big vision here is, because you're not just thinking an e-commerce site. Yeah. There's definitely, of course, nothing has to be fleshed out, but I'm just curious about how you're even thinking about this. Totally.
I'm the type of person who has like the 10-year vision totally locked down. The like 90-day thing, I'm like, wait, so how do I? So to answer your first question, yeah, it's a problem that I've experienced my entire life. And so that definitely pushed me in this place. But I think just naturally, like I'm very entrepreneurial. I'm always problem solving and I love building things and building solutions. So when I was fed up enough with this problem of things not fitting me properly, I decided to just like build a solution for it. And I think like it kind of goes back to what I said earlier on, is like as a tall woman, I thought my purpose here on this planet because being tall is an important thing to me personally. It carries a lot of weight in my life and my experience. I thought it was to be a basketball player, right? I thought that was what that purpose was. But I'm noticing now that it's actually different. It's helping all these other tall women be more confident, and whatever that looks like, whether that is because they have clothing that fits them, or it's because they see content and things out on the internet, on our website and whatever, on our social, where it is building tall women up and like not talking about how weird it is or whatever. Or if it's just that we're able to bring tall women together. Like I said, like when I'm around my co-founders or my tall friends, it's cool. You just like, you carry yourself a little bit differently, right? You can stand up straight when people take group pictures. You don't have to. So there's a lot of things like that I don't know what all the solutions are, but that's kind of our mission, is like anything that we can do to help tall women be the most like confident and comfortable versions of themselves, we will do. Like nothing is off the table, basically.
That is so cool. Slight flavor of Jordan Belfort, maybe. Just kidding.
I've been practicing my whole life.
Just kidding. So the big vision is, to empower and enable, and make women feel confident in their own skin, be it tall, and especially the women who are tall. Yep. And you're also thinking of building a community around it and encouraging IRL, in real life events. One of the things I would love to know, and if you want to talk about this, if you feel comfortable, is like, what kind of things as a startup are you doing to get yourself in front of tall women, and how do you even find them?
The first thing was we found a bunch of Facebook groups with thousands and thousands of tall women literally posting links of like, hey, I bought this long sleeve shirt on Amazon. The sleeves are like surprisingly long. Here's the link. Go buy it. And they just share all these links of clothing items that they find that happen to be long, or like the Gap happens to like have a pair of jeans that are extra long. So that has been good. That actually was like a big launching pad for us, because as soon as we built it, we just started dropping it in there, and we had thousands of people come to our site. So that was really, really helpful to us. So that's one way we find them. The other thing is we started dabbling in some like paid advertising kind of. So we created a style quiz, so that to help women, we worked with a stylist on it to help tall women discover their own personal like style profile. Because again, we don't know. We've never had the like luxury of like being able to express ourselves through fashion. We don't know what our style is. So being able to like create these fun experiences for tall women is just super cool and really rewarding. So anyways, we built this thing and I decided to put some paid ads behind it. And I'm like in the copy, I just led with, are you a tall woman who struggles to find clothes that fit? Take our style quiz, 2-minute quiz, whatever, get your style. And then like, we obviously capture data on their actual height, but like, as soon as you like lead with that type of language, only tall women are going to see that and react to it or want to take action. So that's another way we've been like building up our email lists and stuff like that. And then actually today I'm going to Staples after this. I've printed off, we've designed basically like little things that I just, when I can see physically with my eyes, customers, right? I can just go up to them and be like, hey, I have this stuff, you're tall.
Oh, I love it.
Like you can't like, if you, I don't know, let's say I have like I make sweaters. You can't just walk up to them and assume their style is what you create, right? But like I can just walk up to a tall woman and like 99% of the time, she's going to resonate with the fact that it's really hard to find clothes that fit her body. So I'm going to do more of that. I haven't done a lot of that. And then my co-founder is an Olympic basketball player and WNBA player. And so she has a whole network of people as well. That has helped us a lot. So
that is really cool. I think you had sort of done a breakdown of how to do that the quiz.
It was so powerful.
How to capture leads and how to sort of build out that
It worked so
funnel.
well. Yeah. So I shared it on LinkedIn because it was like, we had been growing our list slowly but surely. And like, for me, I'm an email marketer. I had all the things going, right? Like I had all the things, but like, those only work so well. Right. And so, when we did the quiz, I think it was something like 50, we grew our list like 50 something percent, in 2 months when like compared to the previous 9 months, we had been like slowly growing it just by doing this quiz. And like, it was fun and tall women were sharing it with it, like, so it was kind of cool. So, and I think we did it at Chopra too. They had all these like wellness retreats. They were all drastically different. Which retreat is right for you? So I think it lends itself to a lot of businesses. So I'm like, I need to share this because this is kind of a gold mine.
I love it. I think there's like this sort of baked into that is this personalization that we're not just giving you anything generic with that quiz. You're making it personalized and making it sort of custom feeling to the person. But for the people who are listening and watching, and of course, we'll put the link of that specific LinkedIn post where you sort of did the breakdown in the show notes. But if you were to give us like the cliff notes of it, that would be great.
Yeah, just so I used Typeform, which was the tool we used, making sure obviously that the quiz is like something that would provide a ton of value to the person taking it. Like, don't make it about you, make it about them. Keep it short and sweet. I think we ask somewhere between 7 to 10 questions. It takes less than 2 minutes to do. I would do that. And then I would also say like, I think my advice was to ask like 5 questions that actually will determine the result, but then sprinkle in a couple other ones. Like for me, I wanted to know exactly how tall you were. I wanted to know, we asked also what your body type was, right? So if you're like an H shape or an A or an X or whatever, we can recommend now clothes that flatter those body types, right? So we collected a lot of information that would help us further like personalize the experience for our customers. So definitely do that. And then ask for the emails the very last step, because a lot of people ask like, hey, to get started, what's your email address? People are like, fuck that, I'm out of here. They don't do it. So make them do the like, it's a little psychology here, but like make them get pretty much there and be like, cool, give us your email. We'll email you your results, as well as some like recommendations and stuff like that. And bam. So
you're building out this, or actually, hold on. Let me take one step back for a second. Is for people who are trying to start, their business, they're trying to start like a new product. I think what you talked about is that you went where the conversation was already happening. You found those Facebook groups, for example, and you plugged into that and you started to observe, okay, what's happening here? And then you were able, and that's basically like talking to your users, understanding your users. It's gold. I literally just scroll through there and just look at the conversations that are happening to help us inform how we can best help. It's cool. Yeah. And so for anybody out there who's got no budget and they're like, I don't have like some smart, just go where the conversation's happening. Just listen to what people are saying.
Forums, there's a lot of conversations on Twitter or on Reddit, depending on who your customer is, right? Look at like what the trending TikTok videos are of people complaining about there
is always a way. You just have to be a little bit enterprising. You have to have some agency, and once you find that pulse, and then you sort of double down on that pulse.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that you talked about is when you do these targeted lead capturing sort of to build out your funnel and all that stuff, you're focusing on the people and their pain points and not necessarily trying to sell a product.
Yeah.
And even that quiz, you're trying to learn more about them. So that even makes it even more custom and tailored to that audience. I don't know how much that plays into, hooking them in and getting their interest and ask. So it's like give. I want to learn more about you, and then ask for their email. So when you get their email, what typically happens after that?
Yeah. So they'll give you your email, and then based on their answers to the questions, depending on how they answered the question, it assigned points to the different outcomes of the quiz. And so whichever outcome has the most points, that's their quiz result, right? It's like when I was in high school, it'd be like, who's your dream boyfriend, Nick Carter or Justin Timberlake, right? And you like fill out these quizzes and it tells you who, whatever. It's the same idea. So it's fun, and you give them their result based on their preferences and what they said. You could stop there. But what we did was we then triggered that result to them through email. Actually, the first thing we did on the landing page that shows the result, we tell them about it. Our stylist wrote a little blurb about like things that you should like gravitate to like further express your style, blah, blah, blah. And then the secondary thing was like, oh, hey, we also have a collection of products that match. So we basically mapped all of our products to each of the 6 style profiles.
Oh my God.
And was like, so like for me, I'm the timeless minimalist.
I'm having goosebumps. Like, love it.
Nice.
Love it.
So my profile was the timeless minimalist. And so it would say shop the timeless minimalist collection. And it was only products that like match that preference, right?
Love it.
So we did that. So we would trigger the email with the result as well as link out to that thing. And then we have those on our website. So people can be like, if people are like, oh, well, what's the timeless minimalist collection? Because they haven't done the quiz. We have a call to action to take the quiz. That gets us more data about how tall they are, who they are, their preferences. And then that can inform, like, we are not there yet. I'm not going to sound like we're bigger than we are. But like my vision here is that we have a whole like product personalization recommendation engine that like takes in their style preference, takes in their height and like the actual data around like their measurements or stuff they've bought previously. And we're only marketing to them like the stuff that is for them. We're not there yet. We market to everybody the same way right now for the most part. So we'll get there.
That's a good goal and good vision to have, is to have predictive sort of AI, algorithm sort of working in the background, and being that sartorial sort of. I
would say this is like a way. It's not quite AI. Like I want to have that eventually, like algorithms and all that fancy stuff. But I think quizzes are a really cool way to like bootstrap your way to that, right? Like
yes, be scrappy, and like even the thing that you're saying, you're gonna go print out pamphlets or whatever that thing is, and hand them out one by one. I love it. I love the scrappiness. And having that ingenuity, finding those little crevices where there's opportunity to make things happen. Love it. Okay, so let's close on 2 things. Number one is, in terms of, first, we'll just sort of wrap up the tall size, the business that you're doing. Yeah. And then finally, I'll give a quick summary of what I've learned. And then 3, any final words that you'll have that you want to sort of leave the audience with, and then I think it'll be good to just sort of reiterate what's the best way to connect with you.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So first, with tall size, so you're on this beautiful journey. You're doing these. You're being scrappy, and you're plugging into where the conversation is happening, and then you're finding sort of ingenious sort of ways to make it feel personalized and AI and data driven, and use and even the products that you're matching, to the response that the customer is giving you. I just found that so beautiful. Like there's nothing generic about everything that you're doing. And it's not some millions of dollars of budget required. It's just a little bit of thinking required. And by the way, if you don't know how to do this, just contact Nicole.
Yeah.
So love all the meticulous detail. And I think that thread is coming through based on you being that curious person at Well.ca and asking everybody how they do things. And, so I see that, as one. Two, you constantly focus on the experience that the person is having. And that also goes to the relationship part that you were talking about in terms of where Tall Size is right now. What is the next ambitious thing that you're trying to solve right now? And then we'll close the Tall Size and we'll bring you back and then see where you progress in like a year from now.
Ooh, cool. I like that. So we just wrapped our first year in business, which was a lot of foundational building. Like we formed like 20 partnerships with different brands, got them convinced to join our platform. Built the technology, the logistics, like drop shipping is like, that's how we're fulfilling right now. We have a dream to be able to own the whole thing eventually, but it's complicated. So I would say year one was very foundational. This year is very much about like getting our name out there and building our community, because I'm happy with our on-site conversion rate. I'm happy with our repeat purchase rate, but we don't have enough people coming to the site every day. So even if those things are doing really well, that's only going to get us so far. So we need to fill the top of our funnel a little bit more and get our name out there and in front of more tall women. So yeah, that's our goal for the next year, is like building our community. So let me right now our community is about 6,500 tall women. Hopefully in a year, it's like 50,000 to 100. So we'll see. We'll check in on that when we do part 2.
That is really cool. That is super cool.
I just want as many tall women to know about us and to kind of join and come along this journey with us and find each other as well. That's really the goal for right now.
So just 2 quick final thoughts on just sort of what I've heard. One is the community aspect that you're talking about. Are they all like nested in some sort of like a Slack group, Discord? Is that
Not yet, no.
Or is that like more of like they're part of this email community that you've built out?
Email, social, and then we also have our own Facebook group as well.
Got it. Okay.
But yeah, I would say that the Facebook group is probably the closest to like a Slack or something like that. But we just want to build that up. I'm not exactly sure how that like creates itself yet. But really it comes down to like even in-person experiences and things like that, right? Like we want to be able to have that group of women to invite to these things, and bring to these things and whatnot. So. Okay.
And then one final thing. So, and this is the reason I'm going to ask you this question is because it's a timestamp to when we do this next.
Okay.
So one thing is I'm really curious was like, what is currently the average cart value, ACV of your current customers? And if you want to share that, totally your call. And then 2, this is going to be a more long vision question, which will connect to the next time when we talk a year from now, maybe, or maybe sooner. I don't have a fixed 1 year sort of between each talk, but the other thing I'm really curious because it's such a niche and the way you sort of describe the pain point and how, the response that you're getting, the lifetime value of each person that you bring into this ecosystem, it's like you're selling them cigarettes. They're with you forever, unless like other. I don't know how you think about these 2 things. So ACV and LTV. How do you? And then we close there.
Yeah. So I don't know our LTV yet because it's only been a year. But,
of course.
Our ACV it's changed a lot because we just switched something in terms of like free shipping thresholds and stuff. But it's about 120 to 130. I would say we have a small group of customers right now. So we've done about just under 500 orders. We have a small group of customers who have ordered with us like 5, 6, 7, and it's in less than a year, spending over $1,000. So I do believe that once we get them, if we can be that like trusted resource, we can keep them coming back. The other thing is that we work with a variety of brands, right? So yes, it's niche, but they don't also have to only like our style. Because we work with so many different brands, they can find what they need with us. And I think that is, in my opinion, key to succeeding with this niche audience, because otherwise it gets a little too niche. Do you know what I mean? So being able to give them choice and options is really what we're leaning into. And then I think the other thing that I'm mindful of is from a business perspective, we need multiple revenue streams. We can't rely only on the marketplace. So this is where like in-person events come in. We've already had brands reach out to us asking how to like advertise on our website because we have all these women. So there's other ways that we're going to need to develop in order to build a sustainable business. But yeah, that's where things are at right now.
Oh, I'm so curious to ask you, cost of acquisition, but
I don't know yet.
But yeah, so definitely this is a good timestamp for the next time when we talk, whenever that is.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so I'm going to do a quick summary of what we talked about. Okay. In the meantime, if you want to think about what are the final words you want to leave off the audience with, one, and two, where they can connect with you. Okay. Yeah. So, from what I've heard is that you grew up in a small town. And, you got exposed to sales and Jordan Belfort, dad being in sales, and you were this tall person in a small town, and you found some home and community in being in basketball, by playing basketball. And that's where you sort of found your community. There's also this idea of fitting in and, your parents encouraging to stand tall. I think the element of you having empathy for other people, because you wanted to please other people, make other people happy. So you are always thinking about other people. So that one thread has carried forward till today. You're always thinking about the customer, what they're feeling. Mm-hmm. How do I make it easy for them? That's a thread that's continued throughout your life. Two, you focused on building that community and relationship. Actually, what is community? Community is relationships, one-to-one and one-to-many. And that has also been a thread throughout your life that you've always spoken on, even from your Well.ca days, and being proactive, being curious, and always learning. Yeah.
Always.
And the other aspect is, which I really, 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 really liked, was that you were never waiting for permission. You were always proactive and there are no rules. Wait, I can go talk to that person. I can go ask them that question. Mm-hmm. And you would present the business case and say, I want to take that responsibility. You wouldn't shy away from asking for more, right? Yeah. And all those little things that you were doing has continued with you and stayed with you till now. And of course, they've evolved and you've become more nuanced and much better at it. And then the other thing, which I also really, thought was, that sort of stuck out to me, was that part of that relationship building and, having empathy for, it's like, how do I make it easy for the other person? Now you can see that reflect even in the way you do your quizzes and email. Everything that you do is sort of stemming from this, center place. And then finally, irrespective of, and this is, I think, a good closing point, is that, whether you're starting out or you are ex-VP and have led these senior roles, when you're trying to build a relationship with anybody, whether it be with your colleague or you're trying to start a business and trying to find a client, go in interested and ask informed questions by doing the research beforehand. Learn about that person. You don't have to be senior, and you can be in a position of controlling that conversation because you're asking interesting questions. You're challenging, not threatening.
Yes.
And you, so that holds true for juniors and seniors. And by setting that tone early, you're creating a perception in the other person's mind of your skill set because you are what you communicate. Yeah. So those are all sort of the best learnings that I've had.
Notes.
Just the best learnings that I've had from sort of this conversation. Okay, so now over to sort of you for any final thoughts, notes before we wrap up.
Yeah, I think if I were to leave with just one message or one piece of advice to anyone listening to this is just get really clear on what it is that you want. You underline, capital, bolded, all those things. Because I think, whatever, I'm not going to get into it. We've all pleased way too many other people. So get clear on what you want and think about it every day. Think about it every single day. And just naturally, you'll start to gravitate towards opportunities and people that are in line with that. And it just brings you closer to who you are, what makes you happy, and you'll just feel more fulfilled. That's one big learning I've had this past year. And then I think the last thing is just like, create those relationships and create those opportunities. Don't wait for them to come to you.
Great. Nicole, this was a super fun conversation. I learned so much and I love your perspective. I love the way you approach life, and you are this curious, progressing person. So where can people find you and connect with you?
Right now, just hit me up on LinkedIn. If it's like business related, I'll put my other social stuff in there. Everything's open. I'm an open book, so you can follow along there. But I would say if it's related to tall size or coaching or consulting, just hit me up on LinkedIn for now. And then hopefully in the next little while, I launch my website, and that would be another place. But we can add that to the show notes when the time comes.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Paul. This was really fun.
Same. Agreed.
This was really fun. Cool, dude. Oh, fuck you.